What's up, everyone? Omnisensei here with What If I Was Reborn in The Walking Dead as a Spec Ops soldier before the zombie apocalypse? Part 2. If you enjoy this content, please smash the like button. If you haven't already, please subscribe to the channel. Don't forget to check out the original story linked in the description. I hope you enjoy listening to it. Shane is a cop. He must know something we don't. Listen to everything he says, that's the only way we'll be saved. The hushed whispers of several people caught the attention of those nearby, all trying to hear what Shane was about to say. I'm really sorry. I'm here as just another civilian, and I don't have knowledge of what's happening or what will happen in the future. But I can say that I have more information than most, and I don't rule out the possibility that someone might come to our aid if we stay united. As soon as everyone heard him, they felt as if his words had illuminated the abyss they were being drawn into. Shane took advantage of the moment to form a strong group that could help keep his friend's family safe. I am a victim of this incident just like all of you. My city was in chaos days ago when I left in search of shelter. Right now, my only priority is the safety of a work companion. But that doesn't mean I don't understand everyone else's situation. Right now, you may be wondering who is in charge of public security. Even though I abandoned my post as one of the last officers, I still have my badge, and I currently have direct contact with a CDC member. Shane wasn't a selfish person. Even though he knew that security could be compromised if someone in the group was infected, he was willing to take that risk, considering the advantages of a large group. I know how to use firearms, and as long as I am able, I will help keep you safe until all of this passes. In our current situation, the worst thing we can do is act alone. Only by joining forces can we form a group, work together, find a temporary shelter, and wait for my friend to contact me. Shane's words were well received by most of those present. Hearing that he had a government contact, they all decided to follow him. Officer Shane, you're right, but I want to ask you something. Do you have a place that can serve as temporary shelter? Morales was more concerned with practical matters. Like many there, his priority was his family's safety above all else. Seeing that it was just a simple question, Shane felt this was a great opportunity. He continued speaking to reassure everyone. I know a good place. It's near a quarry that's been abandoned for many years. The infrastructure has been demolished, making it inaccessible, and very few people go there. After saying this, Shane showed them a map with the route marked. This had been specially prepared by Jason, who had foreseen that something like this might happen. Everyone looked at the map and agreed to follow this plan first. Andrea was the first to raise her hand and said, "Let's go. We have to leave. It's better than being stuck on this road." Glenn also spoke in a serious tone. I'll go too. I only have food for one more day. I can't stay here waiting for help that will never come. Yes, but we need to discuss things beforehand to find a truly safe place to settle, Dale added, joining the conversation and expressing his agreement. More and more people raised their hands in approval, and soon the rest followed. All right, now that we're clear on the plan, let's return to our vehicles and get ready. We'll meet back at the edge of the road once we're set, Shane instructed. He then turned to Dale and added, Dale, have some people ride in your RV so we can drive with as few vehicles as possible. Shane tapped the side of Andrea's car and continued talking to Dale while pointing at the map. At some point, take this section of the road. There's an intersection a few hundred meters ahead, switch to the reverse lane and then head west. I'll be waiting for you there. Dale nodded, fully understanding what he needed to do to reach the quarry. About an hour later, Shane and the others met up with Dale's RV. Shane signaled for them to follow him, and they all headed toward the difficult path. In just under an hour, the group arrived at the quarry Shane had mentioned, a valley surrounded by mountains and trees, with a mountain standing in the center. They reached the top of a mid-altitude plateau and found a relatively flat area where everyone agreed to set up camp. This place isn't bad. Shane has some foresight, Morales commented as he got out of the car, chatting with Daryl, who simply listened. "We can wait here while things settle down," Shane murmured, a somewhat nervous look in his eyes. Everyone started setting up the camp and dividing responsibilities. They had no idea how long they would be staying there, so mutual cooperation was essential. In the documents Jason had left for Shane, the virus situation and the hopes for a cure were detailed. To be honest, the future looked grim, but he still had hope that this would all be resolved. CDC headquarters, Atlanta, and all of society collapsed in just a matter of days. George stared at the distant buildings, lost in thought. With a mustache, long hair, wheat-colored skin, and dark eyes, he had joined Jason as soon as he heard he could return to service. To be honest, it still felt strange to be back in an institution that allowed him to wield a weapon again. The pay was high, and the requirements were almost non-existent. After learning what he had to do and joining the CDC with the others, he now felt incredibly lucky to be in this place. He had companions, people to talk to, which meant there was still a chance to fight for life, and that brought him comfort. Nicholas frowned. What was happening was unimaginable. He couldn't process the government's decision to bomb the city with missiles and napalm. If this was happening in Atlanta, the same must be happening all over the world. What awaits us now? Nicholas asked with a deep sigh. Hearing his words, Tyler, who was watching the raging fire, felt the situation was truly dire. If the government had resorted to such drastic measures, then the military had completely lost hope in restoring order, hadn't they? In such a short time, society had been consumed by the virus, and it was clear that the world they once knew would never exist again. The only thing left for us is to survive. We have to be strong and grateful for our current situation. Not everyone has the same conditions as we do in this place. While fear gripped some, many others simply watched in silence. The number of walkers was increasing, and it was only a matter of time before things got even worse. Scientists around the world were still fighting to find a cure, while soldiers continued to contain the virus. The elderly had lost all hope and simply waited in silence. On the top floor of the CDC facility, Jason stared out the window with cold eyes, his mind deep in thought, considering all the possibilities. As the sound of gunfire echoed from time to time, his focus remained fixed on only one thing, what he needed to do next. Emergency broadcast. Attention, attention. It is reported that the virus known as wildfire is spreading at an alarming rate worldwide. Recent reports indicate that security in Atlanta has collapsed. The situation in other regions of the country remains uncertain. Stay tuned for further updates. The World Health Organization, in collaboration with elite teams from several countries such as France, the United Kingdom, Russia, and China, together with the CDC, is working tirelessly to contain the wildfire virus. It is estimated that a vaccine could be available within a minimum of 4 months. We ask for calm and cooperation during these critical times. The government has established multiple refuge points for the civilian population. With martial law in effect, military forces have been deployed to ensure the safety of all citizens and manage the situation regarding the infected. Follow official instructions and proceed to your assigned shelters. The chaos is increasing. We reiterate the call. If you are experiencing symptoms or know that you are infected, report immediately to health authorities. Your decision will not only protect your loved ones but will also contribute to society's survival. Be brave and die for the living before you kill humanity's hope of returning to what it once was. CDC, Atlanta, days after the bombing. Jason sat in a chair, his left hand gripping a rifle as he watched the camp that had been set up outside the facility, analyzing his odds. A part of him wanted to save the civilians outside, while another part told him to wait. It had been an entire week since the military established itself outside the CDC facility, but according to Daniel's reports, these soldiers would not be able to maintain security for many more days. But Jason had known this from the start. After all, in his past life, this facility had been an important location for those who knew its history. And he knew better than anyone what his priorities were. protecting the facility to avoid losing Candice. If they admitted civilians into the facility now, it would be unfair to the many who could not get in. There wasn't much he could do for the people outside at this moment. Controlling a large crowd would only disrupt his upcoming plans. It is said that to build a new society, the old one must be destroyed, and that comes with making many enemies. He had thought it through, and he would only help the soldiers and civilians outside once the barricades became unsustainable. But for now, he just had to wait until everything settled and start planning what to do next. This is a disaster, isn't it? Hearing the voice beside him, Jason shifted his gaze and saw Tommy, his hands tucked into his vest. Like the others, he was growing anxious from staying inside the CDC for so long. When Jason had first contacted Tommy to have him join his private security company, everything had started as a series of plans that would later change. Over time, he had shared his story with Tommy, and they had become close friends who understood each other better than words could express. Jason knew that Tommy loved music and chewing gum. His favorite pastime was treating people with his limited medical skills. But despite his noble personal interests, his perpetually irritable personality meant he had few friends. That was why Tommy had insisted so much on having Jason as a friend. After all, they were remarkably alike. Looking outside the CDC at the refugee camps, Jason saw families embracing, their faces filled with worry. The soldiers were no different. They all knew firsthand the hell that had been unleashed upon society, and all they could do was hope for the announcement of a cure that had yet to come. Even if we can't do much for those people outside, we need to broadcast valuable information on the radio about how to deal with the infected for the rest of the world. Jason referred to the infected as people, as no one had yet grasped the concept of walkers. Hearing those words, Tommy looked at Jason with wide eyes. He had seen the innocent expression on his friend's face, but he knew better. Deep inside, Jason was a true monster. Tommy felt uneasy about Jason's expression, so he nodded in agreement and said, "We must keep this place secure at all costs. If the scientists discover a cure, all the chaos will end, and people will be able to return to their normal lives." Do you know what will actually happen? After a moment of silence, Jason placed his hands on the window glass and said, "The order you know will crumble, and what remains will be nothing but the ashes of a forgotten civilization. There will be no rules, no mercy, no humanity. Those who survive will do such atrocious things that even beasts will fear their shadows." Jason scoffed at his younger self, knowing there was nothing exciting about living in a world like this. There was no fun, no thrill, just despair eating him alive. Will it really be that bad? Tommy had always respected Jason, but seeing him like this truly terrified him. Jason, who had been reading a lot lately, looked at Tommy and said, "You know it. The population will shrink, food will become scarce, and desperate people will turn to cannibalism. Betrayal will come from those closest to you." Saying this, Jason paused, looked at Tommy, and grabbed him by the shoulders. "When the time comes, we must create a strong and united society, one that is hardworking and responsible. I hope that by then, you'll be able to help me, Tommy, because I won't be able to do it alone. Will you stay by my side until the end, Tommy?" "Of course, I'll support you wherever you go, Captain. All of us who have followed you until now will continue to do so." That night, as the world slept and silence enveloped every corner of the facility, Jason closed his eyes. But sleep never came. Instead, memories surged through his tense mind, bringing fragments of a past so hazy he could barely piece them together. They were like distant dreams, blurry images of a yesterday that felt foreign, and yet, every morning, when the sun rose over the horizon, those memories returned to him with cruel clarity. They weren't just shadows of what once was, but open wounds that never healed, sensations so vivid they burned into his skin. Jason feared that one day he would forget who he truly was. Secretly, he hoped never to forget. But unfortunately, he was losing memories, making his certainty about what was to come even more vivid. "Give me the strength to walk this path, to build a new world," he murmured, praying to any god who would listen. despite not being religious. For a few seconds, his prayer went unanswered. But he didn't need a response. He had learned that faith in others was a luxury he could not afford. For days, he had studied every agent under his command within the CDC. Jason was about to take the next step, so he needed to know the people he had been observing now that the world was collapsing. Their gestures, their words, their deepest fears. He knew what they wanted, what they feared, what made them human, and what made them dangerous. He could not afford the mistake of blindly trusting people he didn't know. He had worked too hard, gathered too many resources, and drawn up plans with surgical precision. Every effort, every sacrifice, every decision made in the solitude of his mind formed the foundation of his future. He would not allow anyone to take away what was rightfully his. Throughout that week, he forced himself to interact more with others. He measured their responses, assessed their loyalties, and searched for the slightest crack in the facade of those around him. And when he promised to make decisions for the good of the group, to take risks before putting anyone else in danger, it wasn't just words. It was a leader's vow to his subordinates. Outside the CDC, dozens of army trucks began loading supplies, and all their engines roared to life. More than a dozen armed soldiers climbed into the vehicles, fear evident on their faces. Just minutes ago, the defenses had been breached by many of the walkers they had been holding back with ease. The unexpected came shortly after, that was the outbreak of an infection within the temporary civilian shelter. "Sergeant, are we abandoning these people?" the soldier asked hesitantly. "We've done everything we can. The defenses of this camp are unsustainable." The middle-aged man didn't even lift his head at the question. Instead, he kept studying the map, searching for a viable relocation point. The soldier said nothing more, shutting the small iron window before leaning back in the passenger seat, watching the chaos unfold outside. "What about the CDC security? Is it really impossible to create a cure in such a short time?" "Shut the hell up. This decision fills us all with shame, don't make it any heavier." In the rear compartment, the middle-aged man in special combat gear looked at the soldiers before him and said, "All right, if we evacuate using this route, we'll avoid the main streets. We haven't received any government reports in a week. There's nothing more we can do but retreat. Move out." Several army vehicles began leaving the provisional camp, and the civilians, realizing this, scrambled to find a means of escape. But not everyone put their own survival above their duty. While some soldiers fled, others were giving everything they had to protect the people they had sworn to defend. Bang! 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 Boom! The defenses have been breached. Get to the vehicles and start loading people in. We need to get out of here. Understood, Captain. The few remaining soldiers had solemn expressions as they acknowledged the importance of their actions. With eyes full of determination, they responded in unison. Everyone began moving, but they knew this was unsustainable. With the chaos that had just erupted, many had already been infected with the virus. It was only a matter of time before everything collapsed. Bang! 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 Move, now! Mom, I'm scared! The soldiers opened fire on the numerous walkers swarming the camp, but the situation was spiraling out of control. "Marcos, we need to fall back now," shouted a sweat-covered black soldier. "Everyone, follow me. Retreat along the planned route and find an exit." Around 30 soldiers moved alongside hundreds of civilians retreating with them. From a distance, they could see that the entire temporary camp had been overrun by walkers. Many had already fallen victim to those monsters' teeth. Bang! 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 Reloading! "Mike, cover me!" Marcos shouted as he looked at his comrade, who was positioned far ahead of the rest. "Shit, this is my last magazine, Captain." Mike, the black soldier, glanced at the people behind him, morale at an all-time low. With the military retreating, they had lost a clear defensive line, and chaos consumed everything. "There are too many of them." As everyone retreated toward the CDC's main gate, hoping it would open, they struggled to hold their ground, firing at the closest walkers. On the other side of the gate, Jason stood with a team of 50 elite soldiers strategically positioned to contain a potential walker breach, awaiting orders. "All right, we're saving these people." "Understood, Captain." Just as the soldiers who had run out of ammunition were about to lose hope, the gate behind them opened, and a heavily armed group surged forward. Moving past the retreating soldiers, they opened fire on the advancing walkers. Bang! 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 "Everyone, get inside now." At those words, dozens of civilians and soldiers rushed into the CDC without a second thought about the people who had come to their aid. Jason, leading the advance group, aimed with precision and fired at the slow-moving walkers. He still couldn't believe how these creatures had overwhelmed armies armed with powerful weaponry. "Captain, everyone's inside," Billy shouted loudly. "Good. Fall back." Not wanting to waste more ammunition, Jason stopped firing and stepped inside the facility to face the next challenge. Once inside, whether soldier or civilian, everyone was deeply grateful. But at that moment, the highest-ranking soldier among them stepped forward and murmured, "Thank you for opening the door. You saved many lives when that wasn't your responsibility." Jason ignored the black man's words and instead focused on the civilians gathered in the massive reception hall. "I'm relieved to know everyone is safe." Yes, it all happened so suddenly. After recovering from the shock, the black soldier named Mike took a closer look at the elite unit that had saved them from the walkers, wondering who they were. If they were from the CDC, they shouldn't be this heavily armed. "All right, everyone will undergo a blood test." Removing his mask, Jason spoke clearly and firmly. "Now, I'm going to ask 2 questions, one for the soldiers and one for the civilians." Sensing something unusual, Mike and his friend Marcos looked at the man speaking. "My name is Jason. I risked my life to save all of you under my responsibility. Now, my job is to maintain security in this facility, so I ask you, will you remain soldiers, or will you become civilians?" Jason observed the soldiers, their faces frozen in shock. The emotions they had just experienced had clearly taken a toll on them. And for the civilians, courage is indispensable in this facility. Nothing will be given for free. You must prove your worth to stay here. Do you agree that we all must help one another? If some of you wish to stop being soldiers, you may become civilians, whom we will protect. But for those who want to be useful, believe me, there is plenty of work to be done here. Jason paused before adding, "But if you choose to remain soldiers, you will follow my orders, absolutely." Official statement, current situation and emergency measures source, Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. To all citizens, this is an urgent announcement regarding the latest developments in the ongoing health crisis. In the past few hours, containment forces have suffered numerous casualties in a desperate attempt to slow the spread of the virus. Despite coordinated efforts, the infection continues to expand, leading to an escalation of the national emergency. The Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC, reports that in case of exposure to the virus, it is crucial to act quickly and take drastic measures to minimize the risk of transmission. It has been confirmed that if a person is infected in vital areas of the body, such as the torso, neck, or head, the infection is irreversible, and no effective treatment is currently known. However, in cases of bites or wounds localized to the limbs, the only chance of survival is the immediate amputation of the affected area. This must be done within the first few minutes after infection to prevent the virus from spreading through the bloodstream. Subsequently, the wound must be cauterized immediately to reduce the risk of secondary infection and improve the chances of survival. The population is strongly advised to stay informed through official channels and avoid contact with infected individuals. Cooperation and quick decision-making can mean the difference between life and death. Stay safe. Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. To the entire population, this is a high-priority message issued by the Center for Disease Control and Prevention, CDC. It has been confirmed that infected individuals, once their vital activity has ceased, completely lose their humanity and fall into a state of instinctive aggression induced by the virus. According to previous research, these individuals no longer possess consciousness or memories and act solely under the impulses of the infection. It is strongly recommended to immediately eliminate anyone who has succumbed to the virus. The most effective way to neutralize them is to aim directly at their head, as the brain is their primary weak point. To all survivors, remember that you have a crucial advantage over the infected. You are stronger, faster, and, most importantly, smarter. Your ingenuity is the key to enduring in this devastating scenario. Stay united, plan your movements, and never let your guard down. Once the virus invades the body, there is no chance of recovery. The CDC continues working tirelessly in search of a cure. In the meantime, your priority is to survive and resist. Every day you stay alive is another step toward the possibility of finding a solution. Do not give up. Persist. Fight. This radio broadcast had been aired under the CDC's alias by Jason's orders, hoping to reduce the chances of an outcome he already knew too well. But he was not entirely desperate, and now the situation at the CDC in Atlanta had changed. The facility housed over 100 active soldiers, more than half of whom belonged to special forces. Among the civilians were police officers, security guards, and firefighters, many of whom had previously served in the military. Training them wasn't difficult. After all, using a firearm is easy. As for the other civilians who had joined the facility, they worked in various areas to keep the place running. Including scientists, guards, and civilians, the CDC had a total of 217 people. With proper supply regulations and food distribution, everything was running smoothly. Jason had taken the time to carefully observe the survivors who entered his territory. He studied them, and he even learned their names. After the military abandoned the temporary shelter, they left behind many valuable resources that Jason couldn't ignore. In the following days, he gathered machine guns, military vehicles such as Humvees, tanks, and trucks, as well as weapons, essential supplies, and various equipment. The resources left behind by the soldiers in their attempt to flee proved to be extremely beneficial for Jason's group. While the remaining walkers were eliminated, the area was thoroughly cleaned to prevent infections and diseases. After some time, the facility was completely cleared, and the corpses were incinerated. The resources were transported to the 5th floor of the CDC and the parking lot. For now, Jason's authority was absolute. Everyone looked up to him, believing he was capable of things others could not. His vision of future events was the best, and he was always prepared for any situation that might arise. In the command center, Tyler ensured that the broadcasts changed daily so that those still fighting for survival would not lose hope in the government. As everyone gradually adapted to life inside the CDC, Jason was making preparations to receive new survivors. According to him, the reach of refuge announcements should be limited, ensuring a controlled number of newcomers within his ranks. Jason was highly intelligent and had established certain restrictions moving forward. Survivors who arrived would be subject to strict rules. He was not a savior, and if people wanted his protection, they needed to be useful in some way. Upon settling in the CDC, all newcomers were required to undergo a 1-week isolation period while they learned about the facility and its regulations. If they failed to follow the rules or caused trouble, they would be expelled. And for those who sought to cause more than just trouble, their end would come swiftly. In the blink of an eye, nearly 40 days had passed since Jason returned to the CDC. During this time, he had contacted Shane on multiple occasions, keeping him informed about the situation. He also took charge of resource runs while training soldiers on the proper way to kill walkers. Today, there were 200 people capable of using firearms, practically soldiers under Jason's command. They had all learned the importance of rules and the necessity of working to earn the benefits they received. Those who were not part of security teams had other crucial jobs. Some possessed skills that were not yet useful, such as farming or hunting, and they were usually assigned to cleaning duties. Jason was extremely strict and observant when categorizing everyone at the facility. As of today, the CDC housed a total of 418 people. On multiple occasions, Jason had led the new soldiers on expeditions. Every time they returned, they brought back resources. By ensuring sustainability, Jason could keep this group under his wing. He knew he couldn't act alone, especially as finding trustworthy people became increasingly difficult. Although Shane and the others struggled at the quarry, they managed to survive. Since it was the beginning of the end of the world, Glenn and the rest had also managed to gather a good harvest in the city's outskirts. Jason had heard that they were planning to head downtown, a place they hadn't ventured into in recent days. Jason secretly calculated the time. It should only be a few days before Rick wakes up. And all signs pointed to the beginning of the story. But this was something Jason had disregarded long ago. For now, he couldn't afford to consider those factors while he was focused on creating a strong and sustainable refuge. Jason arrived at the garage and inspected the numerous vehicles inside. There were 20 Hums, all armed with functional machine guns, 10 M1 Abrams tanks, and several military trucks for transporting people or supplies. The arsenal in Jason's hands was more than enough to keep the refuge secure. As long as he remained cautious, nothing bad would happen here. Looking at the RV he had prepared and specifically modified, it was ready to be deployed at any moment. Now, it had been equipped with a heavy machine gun. Now, when Rick woke up from his coma, Jason would be ready to meet Shane's group and consider his next steps. On a specific floor of the basement was the staff dormitory. The upper floors had also been prepared for people to rest. Rick, who had been in a coma for almost 2 months, slowly woke up. In reality, he had not been in a deep coma, but his senses of the outside world were severely dulled. He vaguely knew that something had happened around him while he was unconscious, but he couldn't remember after suddenly trying to think about it. Almost 2 months of bed rest had slowed his body down a bit, but thanks to the good care he had received in this place, he was much better. That allowed Rick to sit up, looking at his hands and touching his abdomen. He clenched his fists and felt every corner of his body. "Is anyone there?" A hoarse voice came from his throat. 2 months of silence had made his throat feel a bit uncomfortable. Just as he was about to call out again, he felt a tickle in his throat. Cough, cough, cough. The violent coughing fit left Rick momentarily breathless. He turned to the side, trying to get some water, but the strength in his legs was weak, and he collapsed straight to the floor. The door to his room opened, and the nurse followed by Jenna entered. When they saw Rick lying on the floor, they immediately stepped forward to help him up. After making sure Rick wasn't injured, the nurse began checking his condition. "Rick, right? You've been in a coma for a long time." Candace smiled at Rick, giving him a reassuring expression. Rick was filled with doubts and was about to ask something, but Jenna pulled out a radio and said, "ZZ. Jason, your friend is awake." "Got it, I'll be right there." Only a man's voice came through the radio. Just 2 minutes later, footsteps were heard outside the door, and a rugged-looking man with a strong build, messy black hair, and a uniform entered the room. Rick suddenly felt that this person seemed familiar. He had definitely seen him somewhere before. "Hey, Rick, do you remember me?" Jason changed his serious expression to a friendlier one, walked toward the bed, and glanced at the medical report. "Who are you?" "I think I should know you." Rick searched through his still confused memory, and Jason's face gradually overlapped with a person he recalled. "You were the one who took action against that thief." What was your name?" Rick clumsily patted his head. "Don't force it. I'm Jason. Although we didn't interact for long, you should remember me. How's the preliminary checkup?" Jason asked, looking at the nurse. "Yes, Jason. I remember now. I feel fine. There's no need to check my condition." Candace suddenly spoke up from the side. "I think you should let them check your condition. You've been in a coma for a long time, and we need to assess how well you're recovering." Rick silently nodded when he heard this and obediently lay down. After an inspection, the nurse removed the stethoscope and said with a smile, "Rick, congratulations. You're in great health, and your recovery is complete." Originally, when Rick woke up among the undead, his wounds hadn't fully healed, but that was because medicine and nutrition had been insufficient. Many might say it was unreasonable for Rick to have survived after being in the hospital for 2 months. But in reality, it was possible due to various factors that had not been known at the time. While everyone was busy surviving, the hospital in King County remained occupied for the following month. Even after the outbreak, there were people in King County helping the patients. The patients in the hospital died one by one due to a lack of medicine, but some continued to care for the remaining ones. A large number of walkers gradually gathered in one particular room, the same room where Rick later saw the words, "Dead inside, do not open," after waking up. Now, thanks to the good care he had received, Rick was recovering well, and his wounds had long since healed. Finally, once the inspection was over, Rick asked the question he had been holding in for so long. "Jason, where am I? Where's my family? Why am I here with you?" Rick fired off a series of questions, none of which he could answer himself. Patting Rick on the shoulder, signaling him to lie down first, Jason said, "Rick, your family is fine, and Shane is alive. Don't worry, I'll tell you everything that happened." Jason then briefly recounted to Rick what had happened over the past few days. From the moment he was shot to the moment he woke up. Rick held his head in disbelief. He couldn't believe he had been unconscious for a full 2 months. Edwin Jenner also added from the side, "When Jason and his people brought you here, I thought you were a test subject and infected. You really have to thank him. Thanks to Jason, you received care under conditions that are nearly unthinkable in today's world. Many thought you wouldn't wake up, but Jason was convinced you would." Rick slowly sat up, placed his hands on Jason's arm, and said solemnly, "Jason, I don't know how to thank you. I owe you my life." "Yes. You owe me your life." Jason kept a serious expression and repeated Rick's words in the same tone. The two men stared at each other for a few seconds before Rick couldn't help but laugh, followed by Jason. "Heh, heh, heh." Their bond deepened through laughter, and a sense of trust began to form, one that needed no words. Jenna and Candice exchanged glances and smiled. In these times filled with death and betrayal, this kind of mutual kindness felt incredibly valuable. Jason signaled for Rick to wait a moment, then took the radio from his vest and pressed the button to transmit. "ZZ. Shane, this is Jason, do you copy? Over. ZZ. Copy that. Jason, this is Shane. What's going on? Over. ZZ. I think you should call Laurie over. Over. ZZ. This is Laurie, I'm right next to the radio. What happened? Did something happen to Rick?" Laurie's voice carried a hint of worry. Jason didn't respond directly. Instead, he handed the radio to Rick, who was visibly emotional beside him, and said, "Take your time." ZZ. "Laurie, it's me." ZZ. Rick's hand trembled slightly as he held the radio. Learning what had happened during this time terrified him. Thankfully, his wife and son were safe. ZZ. "Oh, thank God. You finally woke up. Do you have any idea how worried Carl and I have been?" Laurie's voice cracked with emotion. ZZ. "I'm sorry, Laurie, I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have been gone so long, I should have been there to protect you. Listen, I'll come find you tomorrow. Just wait a little longer." Rick displayed the responsibility of a man, something Jason deeply admired. The reason Rick had become the most popular character in his entire story was because his temperament and decisive personality made him the perfect example of someone who would do anything for his loved ones. Rick didn't say much more, he just asked Laurie about her recent situation and then handed the radio back to Jason. ZZ. "Shane, things are calm on my end. and I can now leave without worrying about the CDC's safety. Get ready, we'll be there tomorrow. The next day, the clock struck 7 sharp, and Jason instinctively woke up. He stared at the ceiling of his small room and took a deep breath. Today seemed like a day full of things he didn't usually do very often. But today would be the day he started expanding and ignoring the surrounding situation. As he got dressed, Jason looked at himself in the mirror with a serious expression. To be honest, he had never struggled much to communicate with others, mainly because he was the only one who knew what the future had in store for them. The pressure of never failing followed him wherever he went. I won't make any mistakes. Jason repeated these words every morning without fail. Once he was ready, he left his room and headed to the command center. The place and the paperwork had changed, and Jason had assigned Tyler the task of monitoring the area through the security cameras. As for the others, the soldiers routinely cleaned the surroundings of the CDC and collected important resources. The ranks and security measures remained clear. Civilians were just that and had to contribute to keeping the place running. Meanwhile, soldiers or people with weapons training were ranked slightly higher than those who always stayed sheltered. Get ready to head out. We have a long journey ahead, and we will be selecting the survivor routes that are in contact with us. But keep one thing in mind, there is always a risk factor, and that is an ambush by guerrillas, Jason said, surprising the others. He, better than anyone, knew about thieves, traitors, and murderers who would kill them for a slice of bread. That was why he was always one step ahead. As the observer, there were very few things that escaped his notice during his short trips after returning to the CDC. Are we starting phase 2 now? Tommy showed a certain degree of excitement as he said this. After all, he had grown bored of simply eliminating walkers around the building. This phase 2 implied expanding their search for resources and, obviously, survivors who needed their help. Don't underestimate the walkers. Let's move out, Jason ordered with a serious look, as this time he planned to take half of the soldiers under his command, most of whom had had little contact with the outside world. Some of them weren't even real soldiers, they had undergone training for a month to prepare for survival with the best tools available. As a leader who never ordered anything he wouldn't do himself, Jason always took the lead on expeditions. Through these missions, he got to know the people who had decided to keep protecting others based on their own actions. I'll gather the team, sir, said Mike, the black soldier Jason had saved when the temporary shelter outside the CDC had been abandoned by the military. With a group of 40 people, Jason looked at all of them with a serious expression and said, "Here's the situation, we're heading to King County to search for resources and survivors. After that, we'll move to Atlanta and take a detour from there." Understood. Prepare the vehicles. We leave in 10 minutes. Yes, sir. Looking around, Jason sighed and walked toward the exit. Turning to Mike, who seemed very serious, Jason said, "The trip should be smooth, but remember, fear the living, not the dead. Those walkers are slow and brainless, you just need to keep your eyes open so we don't run into a horde." "I understand, sir," Mike nodded. Since joining Jason's command, he had learned a lot about the walkers. The area outside the CDC had been cleared weeks ago, and all walker bodies had been burned far from the site. At the moment, at least the immediate surroundings of the CDC were free of corpses. Although a few bodies were still scattered around, those were just the kills from the day before. At that moment, Rick and Jason, along with the other soldiers, boarded different vehicles and drove out of the CDC's garage. Seeing the walkers approaching the convoy, Jason pointed out, "Rick, the people infected by the virus are no longer human, you need to remember that." As Jason watched the designated route, a series of gunshots rang out not far from their position, followed by the sound of a higher caliber weapon, likely a rifle. "I get it." The gunfire startled Rick, and he turned his head to look out the window in the direction of the sounds. However, there were too many buildings in the way, and it seemed like the shots were coming from farther than he had initially thought. Jason, noticing this, folded the map and gripped his assault rifle. Picking up the radio, Jason reported, Even though bullets can't penetrate the armor, be cautious of a bigger attack. Roger that. The previous night, Jason and Rick had discussed their plans for today. Their first stop was the police station in King County to collect any remaining weapons and ammunition. Even though Jason had plenty of resources stored in various supply caches, he wasn't in a rush to take everything at once, so anything they could gather was welcome. Another reason for this trip was to pick up some survivors who had taken shelter in the county's buildings. Jason had occasionally received radio transmissions from them. Although the road leading to King County was blocked, the opposite lane was clear. Occasionally, they passed a few abandoned vehicles, but they didn't significantly slow down their progress. It didn't take long for them to reach the town, and there weren't many walkers around. Perhaps because the townspeople had already left in search of refuge, leaving very few infected behind. Rick looked around and couldn't help but sigh helplessly. After mentioning his house, the convoy took a detour onto the street where Rick's home was located. Upon stopping, everyone got out of the vehicles, and Jason walked quietly down the street. "Jason, I'm going inside for a quick look. I need the key to the police station." "Wait here," Rick said before entering the house with an M1911 that Jason had given him. Jason walked toward a building in the distance, peering through the windows. He then raised his hands and called out, "It's safe to come out. We're here to take you to a safe place." As soon as he finished speaking, Mike and some soldiers hurried to his side. Looking at Jason, Mike quickly asked, "Are they survivors?" Glancing at the houses, Mike noticed numerous eyes staring at them in silence. His heart pounded as he shouted, "There are survivors. Prepare the truck for immediate evacuation." Seeing Mike so agitated, Jason explained, "Most of them are elderly people who couldn't escape due to the chaos. Places like this exist all over the country. Fortunately, we've managed to contact some of them, and this seems to be one of the many shelters. If we didn't care about their future safety, they would likely starve to death. There aren't too many of them. Get them into the trucks and check for any injuries." "I'm on it." Hearing Jason's words, Mike agreed. These were difficult times, and nowadays, few were willing to take in elderly survivors. It was surprising that Jason approved of rescuing the elderly, but then again, if they didn't save them now, who would be there to save them when they grew old? Jason didn't follow Mike to help evacuate the survivors. Instead, he walked along the edges of the street, drew his dagger, and silently took down several walkers one by one. Crack! Black blood oozed from their brains, staining the ground. After being stabbed in the neck, they stopped moving. He then walked into the yard of a nearby house and tuned his radio to a specific channel before speaking. "We are here to evacuate people. It is safe to come out." The second-floor window suddenly opened, and a dark-skinned boy leaned out, waving at Jason before rushing down the stairs. Not long after, the front door opened, and a family of 3 stepped out. Jason recognized them immediately: Morgan, his wife Jenny, and their son Dwayne. "Jason, they're here!" Morgan hugged Jason with a smile on his face, and Jenny also stepped forward to embrace him. "Hello, Mr. Soldier." Dwayne approached alongside his mother and greeted Jason. Jason smiled, patted Dwayne's head, then turned to Morgan and said, "Morgan, Jenny, I didn't think there would be so many survivors in this place after our last communications. To be honest, I didn't expect you to come back through here so soon. If it weren't for you and your group, Jenny wouldn't be with us." Morgan was pleasantly surprised by Jason's arrival. The first time they met, Morgan was fleeing from walkers with his family, but they got trapped in the middle of the horde due to traffic. Just when he thought he would lose his family, Jason and his group had appeared and taken out all the walkers. Jason had promised to come back and rescue them, and since receiving his message less than 12 hours ago, Morgan hadn't expected him to arrive so quickly. "Morgan, we are passing through King County and have decided to take all the survivors you've gathered here with us." After saying this, Jason continued, "Today, I can take you to a place where you'll be safe. It's too dangerous to go out searching for supplies every day. This time, we're heading to Atlanta for another group of survivors, but first, we'll split up. I believe that the more people we have, the better we can rebuild." Just as Jason was speaking, Rick stepped out of a nearby house. Seeing a stranger, he hesitated for a moment before approaching. "Jason, do you know them?" Rick asked, looking at the three people in front of him, a family just like his own. Jason turned to Rick and said, "This is Morgan, Jenny, and Dwayne. I met Jenny when my group and I passed through here before. We stopped and took care of some walkers before we parted ways." After speaking, Jason introduced Morgan's family. "This is my friend, Rick. It's obvious he's a cop, one of the good ones." When Morgan saw Rick's police uniform, he could roughly guess his identity, and upon hearing Jason's introduction, he nodded at Rick in a friendly manner. Rick still eyed Morgan cautiously and asked hesitantly, "This house, it belongs to someone else?" Morgan simply nodded and said, "We never saw the original owners. The house was empty when we arrived." Just as the conversation was about to continue, Mike approached Jason and reported, "Sir, the civilians and their belongings have been loaded onto the truck. There are 18 people, most of them elderly. Get ready to move out." Jason ordered in a serious tone. Staying in one place for too long was never a good idea. "Understood." Mike acknowledged before stepping back and giving a brief salute. Quickly, he withdrew and began instructing the soldiers to prepare for departure. Jason noticed the surprised expressions on the others' faces and said, "Even though it may not seem like it, I'm a retired soldier, and I'm currently protecting a CDC center that's still operational." "That's good news. I'm glad there's still some of the military left on the streets of this country," Morgan said with a relieved smile. Rick was surprised that Jason, who looked so young to have such a background, was maintaining the security of a refuge. Jason lowered his hands and glanced at his watch. It was already past 8 in the morning, and as his fingers tapped on the dial, Rick understood that it was time to go. He turned around and walked toward the car. King County Police Department, Armory Boom. The King County Police Station was completely empty, and a group of people quickly made their way to the ammunition storage. "There are far fewer weapons here," Rick exclaimed as he stepped inside the armory. The group quickly moved to the deepest part of the storage room. There were still plenty of firearms and some bullets left in the weapon racks. Everyone hurriedly gathered weapons and ammo. Rick holstered his Colt Python revolver and picked up a Remington 700, handing it to Morgan. Rick said, "It may not look like much, but it's a very accurate weapon." Morgan took the rifle, aimed it to the side as a test, and nodded. "If we're done here, let's move out," Jason said with a slight smile. Finding new weapons always felt good. A few hours after regrouping with the other battalions, Jason sent the less skilled survivors to the CDC. After looking at the equipment Jason and his soldiers had, Rick, who had insisted on taking all the weapons from the police station, murmured, "Well, I guess you don't need weapons, you're well prepared. That doesn't change the fact that we'll take weapons from different warehouses. Anything that can kill is welcome to us." Everyone began moving the equipment into the storage area, and in an instant, they carried off 3 large bags of weapons. Various other items were loaded onto the cargo trucks, to be used only if necessary. Jason had been in communication with several cleanup and resource extraction teams stationed in the surrounding areas. One of the reasons he was in the county near the city was because survivors could be found and rescued more easily here. He had left that task to Morgan, and now that he knew the ideal moment had come to take more action, he decided to start making bold moves. Seeing the elderly civilians in a military truck, Jason didn't hesitate. He decided to send them to the center first, allowing them to rest and recover from the stress of not knowing how much longer they might survive. "All right, let's get out of here." Once the orders were given, everyone got into the cars and trucks, leaving the place behind in a cloud of dust. Sitting in the passenger seat, Jason ensured everything was in order. As the one giving the orders, he led the way back for the main convoy. Around 10 in the morning, the group split into 2. The first headed directly to the CDC with most of the resources, while the second, led by Jason, went to rescue Shane's group. Looking out the window as they got closer to their destination, Jason picked up the radio and spoke in a serious voice. "ZZ. Shane, we're heading toward Atlanta. Is everyone ready to be picked up?" A short time later, Shane's voice came through the radio. "We're not all here. Part of the group went out for supplies a few days ago and hasn't returned yet. They're still in the city. Then we'll pick them up first and come back for you afterward. Be careful." An irrational decision? Not for Jason, who knew all too well that the course of events could change now that he was here. That's why he was willing to take on responsibilities that might not be the smartest. Any small change, no matter how minor, had to pass before his eyes, or he wouldn't notice the difference between today and what lay ahead in the future. That sounds good to me. Hearing Jason's decision, Rick also nodded. From what he understood, that group of survivors was with his wife, and although his desire to reunite with his family was strong, he couldn't help but feel grateful to those who had stayed with his loved ones all this time. He also wanted to see what condition the city was in. Maybe it was even better than King County. As for the soldiers, someone like Tommy, for example, was thrilled to venture into danger and see with his own eyes just how bad the rest of the world had become. With the plan set, 2 trucks and 2 Humms with mounted machine guns drove toward Atlanta. Based on the information displayed on the map, their marked route shouldn't be far from the mall where Glenn and the others had gone. Jason analyzed the location and, after determining that it wouldn't be wise to proceed with such a large group, decided to leave the main team behind. After all, he didn't want to risk his entire team on an idealistic mission fueled by his own arrogance. Looking at Morgan, who had chosen to follow Jason as a way to thank him for saving his family, he said, "Morgan, go up to the upper cabin using the stairs. There's a good vantage point. You can keep an eye on the surroundings for now. Before we return, you can help protect this place along with the other soldiers." After giving his instructions, Jason took Rick and 2 other soldiers to the shopping mall. In truth, Jason hadn't wanted to visit Atlanta, but he was obligated to do so. He vaguely remembered that there was a group of good-hearted refugees in Atlanta, and if he took Rick straight to the camp, Glenn and the others might not make it out alive. Keeping this in mind, Jason wanted to see what the city was like and sharpen Rick's survival skills. Following Jason's instructions, Morgan found the entrance to the mezzanine on the roof, settled in firmly, and continued observing the surrounding area through the shooting port. At that moment, Jason, Tommy, and another soldier, all dressed in black tactical uniforms, prepared to head out. As for weapons, they were all equipped with modified M4s, several double magazines on their vests, and pistols at their waists. Rick was still wearing his county sheriff's uniform, with a pistol holstered at his waist and a machete in hand. Considering that firepower shouldn't be necessary, everyone carried melee weapons to ensure a quiet approach. The spot where they got out of the vehicle was still some distance from the shopping mall Shane had mentioned. There were relatively few walkers outside the city, which didn't pose too many obstacles for the 4 of them. Influenced by those around him, Rick attempted to use his machete to take down walkers that weren't particularly dense along the way. After all, they were aware that even a silenced gunshot could cause unnecessary trouble. After walking for about half an hour, the 4 finally approached the mall marked on the map. "Keep your eyes open in all directions, any alley could be our escape route," Jason reminded them, his sharp gaze scanning the surroundings. "Understood, boss." "The city seems relatively empty," Tommy said, glancing around with slight nervousness. "Look, the area is full of useful weapons and resources the military left behind. After we bring everyone out this time, we should plan to clean this place thoroughly and transport those heavy weapons to the CDC." As he walked beside Jason, Tommy spoke with the soldier about future plans. Jason had been very careful and had taught everyone that whenever they could secure valuable resources, they should take everything, even if it didn't seem useful at the moment. All those heavy weapons lying around could eventually fall into enemy hands, so to prevent that, they needed to expand their cleanup operations. Now that Jason was in this world, he paid attention to even the smallest details, ensuring nothing slipped past him. No matter which group or community he encountered, when the time came, he would have more tanks and weapons than they did. If they had more members, he would have highly trained soldiers in his ranks. Jason only wanted to see who, in the future, would dare to challenge him. Anyone who failed to adapt to the new order or sought to harm a stabilized society, he would cut them to pieces or riddle them with so many holes they wouldn't know where they were breathing from. Crack! Rick's machete split the forehead of a walker next to a truck. He lifted his leg and kicked it off, then turned his head and asked with uncertainty, "Why are you collecting so many weapons? Isn't it enough to have a few for self-defense? I saw that the CDC even has tanks outside." Jason and Tommy turned their heads and looked directly at Rick. Seeing that everyone was staring at him, Rick seemed uncomfortable. Just as he was about to speak, the soldier beside him, who had remained silent, answered the question. "I'd say it's like candy. When the candy is delicious and there's less and less left in the jar, the people who love that candy will fight with all their might for what remains. What would you do?" It was a perfect way to describe how those with more weapons would have food on their table. Rick frowned, thinking carefully as he processed the message, and said, "But if there's no food, we can grow it. As long as there are people, there shouldn't be a problem surviving." That's your way of seeing things? There are many ways of life trying to survive. Maybe someone else would choose to steal food, another might try to intimidate or threaten to get what they want. Those who don't want to harvest food might even resort to cannibalism. Have you thought about that? Hearing this, Rick said nothing as he mulled it over. It's not that you haven't thought about it, you just don't want to believe it. The end of the world will reveal the darkest side of human nature, and all it takes to see those scenarios unfold is time. After saying that, Jason smiled and pointed out, "That's something we can't change, but we can take care of ourselves and our people to avoid those problems. I understand what you're saying, but I still firmly believe there are more good people than bad. All men are bad, Rick. All humans are selfish. The sooner we accept that this world has gone to hell, the sooner we'll learn to survive," Tommy said, repeating something Jason had taught him and that he had come to learn for himself. As they talked, they neared the shopping mall, which had been built on the outskirts of the city. The group of four kept moving forward, clearing walkers along the way, and soon Jason spotted a tank parked at an intersection. This was so familiar. Jason walked to the side of the tank and motioned for Tommy to help him climb up. Seeing this, Rick whispered urgently, "Hey, what are you doing? We need to keep moving." Gesturing for Rick to wait, Jason quickly entered through the hatch on top of the tank. In less than a minute, he popped his head back out, grinning at Rick as he held up the items in his hands. Rick took a closer look and saw that Jason had found an M9 pistol and a grenade. He gestured for Jason to climb down quickly. "Resources are valuable. I think this is my new obsession," Jason murmured, earning smiles from his companions. But at that moment, bang! A gunshot rang out from somewhere above their heads, and Jason quickly turned to scan the surroundings. Bang! Bang! "Locate the shooter's position immediately," Jason ordered as he jumped down from the tank and took cover. Always on high alert, he suspected those shots were aimed at them. The gunfire sounded like it came from a single-shot rifle. Rick turned his head, scanning the area, but what he saw was a large number of walkers emerging from a distant corner. "Move to the alley on the right," Tommy shouted as he cleared the path. "Rick, let's go." Jason grabbed Rick and pulled him along as they all ran into the alley. Bang! 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 Rick drew his pistol and shot the three walkers crawling toward his feet, one by one. "Climb the ladder." Tommy and Jason fired precisely at the heads of the approaching walkers. Rick was helped up by the other soldier, and then Jason ordered Tommy to climb next. If the gunshot from earlier was what he thought it was, and assuming things were happening as he remembered, it had probably been fired by Mull from the rooftop, which meant Glenn was likely nearby. But Jason didn't like guessing. He preferred not to assume or confuse what he knew with the reality he was living in. Everything felt strangely familiar, yet he could only recognize certain details from vague memories. Few things were exactly as he remembered, especially when it came to events like these. "Hurry up, now!" Jason shouted with an almost unnatural expression. He had overlooked a very important detail when he started this journey intentionally, the sound of gunfire. He wasn't a genius, nor did he have control over the altered timeline of this world. That's why small things like these couldn't always go perfectly, and imagining going any further would be pushing the luck he had had so far. Bang! 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 As he stepped back, Jason fired at an almost superhuman speed, precisely hitting the heads of the nearest walkers. He noticed something important in these few seconds: the walkers were faster than the ones he had killed so far. But now wasn't the time to question the differences, it was time to exterminate the closest ones to cover their retreat. "I'm reloading. I'll cover you." Bang! 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 Under Tommy's cover, Jason quickly swapped his rifle's magazine and resumed shooting. With his keen eyesight, cold blood, and superior ability to act under maximum tension, he remained unfazed by the massive horde of walkers that was nearly upon them. "We need to retreat, boss." "I've got your back, go up now," Jason instructed Tommy to climb the ladder next. That was how he always operated, which was why he had earned the respect of even the soldiers who later joined his group. Bang! 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 The heads of those walkers were blown apart as bullets pierced multiple targets at once. Judging by the way they fell, some bullets had passed through multiple walkers' skulls at the same time. At that moment, Jason entered a trance, focusing only on eliminating as many walkers as possible without stopping. Ignoring the ladder entirely, he kept firing. "Jason, climb up now!" Rick shouted from above, his face tense. Bang! 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 Switching magazines, Jason slowly backed toward the ladder. When he could no longer keep firing, he climbed up immediately. Midway, he glanced down at the horde with a cold expression. Arga! The rotten heads, the stench of decay, and the guttural growls were more than unsettling. Tommy shuddered slightly as he saw the massive horde that had swarmed them in less than 5 minutes. Remembering all of Jason's warnings, he broke into a cold sweat. How did Jason predict this? On top of a nearby building, an Asian young man was stunned to see soldiers in black uniforms escaping from the walkers. He noticed that they seemed to be trying to take the tank when suddenly, the sound of gunfire alerted every walker in the distance. By the way the soldiers moved and fired, the young man, who was actually Glenn, knew they were well trained and experienced at taking down walkers. "Sir, are you okay?" Tommy asked, concerned about Jason's condition. "I'm fine." Jason showed no anger or nervousness after surviving the life-or-death situation. Instead, his gaze fixed on the walkers in the alley. From what he could see, they weren't in a bad situation, and based on their options, they could leave the building without trouble. "If everyone is okay, let's move up," Rick said, looking exhausted. These weren't the best exercises to do after coming out of a coma. Before proceeding, they counted their spent ammunition. It wasn't even a third of their total supply, so it wasn't a major concern. The gunfire shouldn't have attracted too many additional walkers either. After all, considering the horde that had surrounded them, there wasn't much room for more. Soon, the 4 of them climbed to the top of the building. As Jason was reaching the roof, Tommy suddenly shouted in a deep voice, "Don't move, you son of a bitch." "Whoa, whoa. I was just trying to help you guys get up." Glenn panicked as 3 assault rifles were pointed at him. "Wait, it's okay. He seems to be from the group we came to find." Rick calmed the situation and said, "Hey, my name is Rick. What's yours?" "I'm Glenn." I just saw you and thought you needed help. I didn't expect you to make it out of that mess on your own. Glenn raised his hands with an awkward smile. Relax, he's with the group we're here to evacuate. Jason had no reason to hide information that was already easy to recognize. Looking at Glenn, he asked, "Are you okay?" "Wait a minute. How do you know me?" "Don't tell me. Are you the soldiers who were supposed to rescue us?" Glenn's eyes lit up, and he looked at Jason with excitement. "Yeah, we're here to help you," Rick confirmed. He was here not only to return the favor to the people who had possibly helped his family but also to better understand the situation in Atlanta. "It's really you guys." Realizing this, Glenn ran to the rooftop, not far away. "It's a miracle to see you here. I thought you'd never come for us. Just a moment ago, I figured you were just people who wandered into the city without knowing any better." Glenn leaned against a wall, looking at the four men. "Glenn, I'm Jason. This is our first time meeting, but for you, it's not the first time hearing about me. I wanted to evacuate everyone at the quarry, but I found out that part of your group came to the city for supplies. So I brought a small team to get you out." After saying that, Jason extended his hand to shake Glenn's. Rick and the others did the same. "Rick, right? I know you well. You're a celebrity at our camp. You were in a coma for so long. We even had a bet on whether you'd wake up or not," Glenn said, then suddenly remembered the bet and murmured, "I'm really sorry, but I bet you wouldn't wake up." Glenn was honest, and mid-sentence, he realized how inappropriate it sounded, but Rick just smiled and didn't mind. "Glenn, take us to the others. We're here to evacuate you, so we shouldn't waste time." Seeing the conversation drift off topic, Jason didn't want to linger when they needed to pick up the pace. "Of course, follow me." Resuming their journey, the five of them quickly reached the back alley of the mall through the emergency stairwell outside the building. The intersection between the back alley and the main street was blocked by a bus, so there weren't many walkers. "We're at the back door. There are 5 of us, and 2 walkers. We'll need some help." Glenn radioed T-Dog through the intercom as he climbed down the ladder on the other side. When he reached the ground, Glenn raised his arms to stop the 2 people behind him, but they ran past him without hesitation. "Take care of them all," Jason ordered as soon as he saw the walkers ahead. Drawing a knife, Jason walked forward naturally before striking the first walker that approached him. Crack! With a clean slash, Jason pierced through the walker's skull. Blood splattered as the infected collapsed. Tommy and another soldier, Jimmy, silently took down several other walkers using the same method. If they could save bullets, there was no reason to waste ammunition they might need later. Thud! At the same time, the back door of the mall burst open with a loud noise, and 2 people wearing plastic raincoats and gloves stepped out. They were Morales and T-Dog, members of Glenn's group who had come to the city for supplies. As the duo prepared to eliminate the walkers at the entrance, they froze upon seeing that none remained. "Give me your machete, Rick." Seeing Jason's request, Rick handed him the machete without understanding what he was about to do. "Tommy, leave the last 3 to me," Jason said as he prepared to do something he had never done before, but he certainly knew the theory behind it. As the walkers approached with slow steps, Jason seized the moment. With several swift cuts, he severed the arms of the 3 walkers. Lifting his leg, he kicked each of them one by one. After that, he stepped forward, stomped on the first walker that was trying to get up, and, with quick machete swings, began to disfigure them. Crack! 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 In no time, the jaws of the 3 walkers were cut off. A group of people watched Jason with bewilderment, unable to understand the purpose of his bizarre operation. "They're perfect." Jason, with a smile on his face, took 2 steps back and signaled everyone to wait. The 3 walkers soon struggled to their feet. Due to the lack of arms, 2 of them fell more than once, but when all 3 finally stood up, everyone was shocked to see them standing there in silence, facing each other without moving. My God! What's wrong with them? Glenn took off his cap, staring at the scene in disbelief. As the only calm person among the spectators, Jason shouted to the two unrecognizable figures in raincoats. Is there any rope or something in the mall? What? Rope? T-Dog, one of the oddly dressed individuals from head to toe, was still stunned. But Morales, beside him, reacted quickly. Yes. I'll get it. Observing the gear these three people carried, it was clear they were from some government group. And judging by what they were doing, they knew far more than the rest. Meanwhile, Tommy silently observed and learned from Jason's actions. He had always thought that the man he had decided to follow was incredibly intelligent and undeniably fierce. As a Special Forces captain, Jason was undoubtedly superior in both intelligence and foresight, hence why he was a captain in the first place. I've got the rope. Not long after Morales had rushed off, Jason took the rope and stepped forward to tie up the three walkers. Each was secured with different ropes, all fastened to the door handle of the mall. Let's go. It's time to meet the others. Understood, boss. This is insane. Glenn walked in with a grin on his face. Glenn, what the hell just happened a moment ago? These damn walkers just stopped trying to eat us. Did you see that, or am I going crazy? This is insane. As soon as they entered the building, T-Dog couldn't help but voice his shocked thoughts. Now, like everyone else, he had a new perspective on the walkers and their characteristics. Wait, T-Dog, we'll talk about that later, because, like you, I don't know much more than what we just saw. Glenn stopped T-Dog from continuing his questions and turned to the others to introduce these new guests to the people in the building. Jason, ever the charismatic man, smiled slightly upon seeing everyone's doubtful expressions. If he had more knowledge about this world and how certain things worked, it was because he knew the events of the future. Now, if for some reason he weren't the way he was now, he wouldn't be so sure he could maintain this attitude and move so calmly in situations like this. He had to be grateful that walkers no longer fazed him after so many days and that he was someone with a cool head. Well, guys, don't be too surprised, but these are the people Shane mentioned before. Jason and the other two are acquaintances who came to take us to a much safer place. As for the other guy in the police uniform, that's Laurie's husband, Rick. Glenn turned to Jason and introduced him as he had the others, then presented his group. This is T-Dog, Morales, Andrea, Jackie, and Mole, the one upstairs. Jason and Tommy exchanged glances. They now knew that the person who fired earlier was the guy upstairs named Mole. Even though there was no need to ask, Rick couldn't hold back his curiosity. Did you guys fire earlier? Rick was still a little upset about what had happened. After all, he and his friends had almost died out there. It was Mole. He got into a fight with T-Dog a moment ago. The guy lost control. And now, because of that, we're in a really bad situation. Morales spread his hands helplessly, expressing that they had no way out of this place. Andrea looked at Jason and the others and asked with a distressed expression, "We'll be able to get out of here, right?" There was way too much movement just now. The walkers must be more agitated than usual. Jason walked to the main entrance and observed the reason why this group was trapped. Indeed, the situation was exactly as in the original story. Even though many events had changed, it seemed that the current scenario was still the same one he was familiar with. But he wasn't too worried. The main plot created various difficulties to make the journey more exciting, but in reality, there were many other ways to achieve the same goal. Besides, there were plenty of ways to get out of this place, so this wasn't really a problem. Jason had figured out two things during this trip. First, he wanted to see what happened if he was directly involved with Rick's group, and second, how much things would change. What do you think? There's not much to worry about for now. There are plenty of ways to get out of here. For now, we need to deal with the unstable factors in this place. Jason gave orders to his team again and headed up the stairs. Jason slowly ascended the stairs, knowing that before doing anything, he needed to establish order. He looked at Tommy and said in a low voice, "We're going to contact the others now. If things don't go as planned, we'll have to request reinforcements." Hearing this, Tommy understood that there wasn't much to worry about in their situation. That's why he didn't say anything unnecessary, he just followed Jason closely. He didn't know how things would turn out, but he definitely trusted Jason and relied on his good decisions to avoid making mistakes. On the rooftop, Mole was standing by the edge, shooting at the walkers on the streets one by one, still talking to himself and shouting non-stop. "Die, you damn racists!" Hearing the sound of the corridor door opening, he knew that the group of rookie survivors was coming back up. Without looking back, Mole aimed at the head of a walker. Just as he was about to shoot, he realized his vision had darkened, his sight was blocked by something. "Damn it! Didn't I explain it to you a moment ago? I'm doing man's work here, you damn piece of chocolate. Shit!" Before Mole could say another word, Jason, who was beside him, struck him with more technique than strength, and Mole lost his balance, falling backward. He dropped the rifle in his hand, but Jason moved quickly and caught it. "Who the hell sucker punches someone from behind?" Mole shouted as he tried to get up. At that moment, his anger made him feel like his heart was pounding in his throat. But before he could stand, he felt two people grab his shoulders, pinning him against the rooftop wall. When he tried to look up, two rifle barrels were aimed at his forehead. Jason, standing in front of Mole, watched the troublesome man, thinking about what to do. "Don't kill him. Oh my God." The few people who had followed him gasped in horror, only to sigh in relief when they saw that the two people dressed like Jason had merely aimed their weapons at Mole but hadn't pulled the trigger. "Who the hell are you pointing at? Lower your damn weapons. If you're gonna shoot, do it now, or I swear I'll kill every last one of you sons of bitches." Even though Mole's situation wasn't great at that moment, his mouth spared no one, and a stream of insults and threats immediately reached Jason's group. "It's okay, everything's fine now." Jason looked at Mole with a thoughtful expression, his eyes scanning him up and down while he held his vest, breathing steadily. "All right, lower your weapons." After Jason ordered his men to lower their guns, the two stepped back and released Mole while giving him a warning look. Contrary to the concerned expressions of the others, Jason just stared at Mole in silence, like a wolf in a rabbit's skin contemplating what to do with its prey. Tommy, standing beside him, asked with some doubt, "What's the plan, boss?" Mole seemed to sense that something was wrong, and his attitude softened immediately. All right, you win. I won't say anything else." "Oh, now you want to stop talking? Should we keep shooting otherwise?" After giving Mole a look that could unnerve even the most passive person, Jason pulled out his gun. No. Just when everyone thought the problem was over, Jason drew an unsilenced pistol and fired into the sky without hesitation. Bang! "Damn it, you're crazier than I am, you son of a bitch." Mole raised his hands to cover his chest, thinking the next shot would be aimed at him, but Jason's action stopped immediately. "I don't like violence, I hate the color red from blood, and I also detest dirtying my hands unnecessarily. Besides, I won't deprive myself of a useful asset in this situation." As he spoke, Jason picked up the spent casing from the ground and walked toward Mole. Ignoring the stares of the others, Jason handed him the bullet casing. "In this new world, I've decided to give only one person 2 chances. You've already used up your first one. I believe you're someone who knows how to adapt, like a wolf ruling its den. You should also understand that when a stronger, larger predator comes for you, the best thing to do is stay silent and follow orders." Mole looked at Jason with a grin and scoffed after hearing his words. But Jason didn't react to the mockery. Instead, he looked at the gun in his hand and handed it to Mole. When Mole saw the pistol in his hand, he fell silent, unsure of what to do. He knew the gun was loaded, and right now, he could put a bullet in the head of the idiot standing before him. But those thoughts came and went quickly. Tommy's eyes sharpened, but he didn't make a move. Everyone held their breath, but but very few understood the meaning behind Jason's actions at that moment. Rick, standing beside him, did. 2 chances, Mull had already used one. This was Jason's test, and if Mull was dumb enough to try shooting him, there was no doubt he would be killed. "All right, I won't do anything stupid." Mull lowered the gun and got up from the ground, showing he was no longer a threat. But then he moved his hand toward Jason. Prepared for the situation, Jason extended his hand, grabbed the gun's barrel to prevent it from firing, and then lifted his right knee, striking Mull's stomach. Thud! The pistol Mull had tried to strike him with was stopped by Jason, and it fell to the ground. His right foot landed lightly, and as soon as he leaned forward, his body spun, and his left leg shot toward Mull. Mull was also highly experienced in fighting. Seeing the gun get kicked away, he didn't think of picking it up. Instead, he pulled out a dagger from behind him. The blade slashed toward Jason. Twisting his body, Jason moved slightly to evade Mull's knife. Then, he turned his left hand into a fist and precisely grabbed Mull's wrist, the one holding the dagger. Mull only felt a sharp pain in his wrist before his entire arm was twisted behind his back. Damn! Mull, gritting his teeth in pain, loosened his grip, and the knife fell to the ground. Jason quickly kicked it away. In just a few seconds, all the weapons on Mull's body had been taken away by the man before him. Mull felt a little frustrated, even to the point of considering begging for mercy, but as soon as Jason let him go, he stepped back without giving him another glance. Jason picked up the pistol from the ground and holstered it. Then, he looked at Mull and smiled as he said, "Mull, of course. Let's get to know each other better. My name is Jason." Mull rubbed his wrist and looked at the man in front of him. He was strong but also skilled. From that brief fight alone, it was clear this man was highly capable. While he didn't seem to have formal training, he had fought all kinds of people for years, including military personnel. But just now, all his attacks had been predicted and countered by his opponent, proving that Jason wasn't just an ordinary soldier. Realizing this man wasn't someone he should provoke, Mull immediately changed his approach. This was one of the main reasons he had survived for so many years. Knowing how to read a situation and adapt accordingly. Thinking about it, a broad smile instantly spread across Mull's face. He took a step forward, stretched out his hand, and said, "Buddy, you that Jason? Why didn't you say so earlier? I've heard a lot about you at the camp. We knew you were coming to take us to your shelter. How could I attack my own savior? You hypocritical bastard." Jason thought with a slight smile. From the moment he had first seen this man in the original story, Jason knew Mull was a wild and untamed person with no clear distinction between good and evil, a natural survivor. Jason understood that this man's nature wasn't inherently bad. Compared to his younger brother, Daryl, he had endured some of life's harshest beatings, which was why he acted tough around strangers. If someone like Mull didn't get himself killed through his own reckless actions, his survival instincts would be among the best. He would do whatever it took to stay alive, whether by exploiting others or becoming a demon himself. But people like him rarely ever truly followed a leader. In their eyes, the strong ruled this world. Respect and morality didn't exist. Survival was the only thing that mattered. This city smells like shit. Less than before, of course, Mull muttered as he picked his nose. Jason didn't need to force him to surrender or turn him into a prisoner. He just needed to make it very clear that if he ever did anything to endanger everyone again, things would end in a way he didn't want to mention. Mull had to understand that messing with him was not an option. "Mull, I can understand you and respect your way of living. There's just one small rule you have to follow. Don't create any unfavorable situations for my team. So, you have the chance to put an end to our problems. What do you say?" The crowd around them had just calmed down from the tense atmosphere, but as soon as they heard Jason's words, they all turned to look at Mull, eager to see what he would say. Mull wasn't embarrassed in the slightest. With a grin, he put his arm around Jason's shoulder, turned his head toward the crowd, and said, Ha ha ha. Jason, I'll agree to your terms. Just because it's you. From now on, no one here will think about causing trouble. If anyone breaks the plan, I'll personally beat them up. Everyone fell silent upon hearing those hypocritical words. T-Dog even started ignoring everything Mul was saying. Rick shook his head. This guy seemed like a very troublesome idiot. Seeing that Mul had settled down, Jason had nothing more to say. He turned his attention back to the situation below the building. All right, but first, let's figure out the best way to get out of this place. Yeah, that's what I was thinking. We need to figure out how to get out of this damn place, Mul echoed Jason's words as soon as he dropped the subject. Jason walked to the edge of the building and looked down at the city, trying to determine the best and least problematic way out. Contacting his people outside the city wouldn't solve their current situation. Starting a large-scale shootout to escape would bring nothing but losses. As an idea formed in his mind, Jason turned to Tommy and said, "Give me your radio. There's something I overlooked when we came here." All right. Tommy pulled a radio from his vest and handed it to Jason, his expression calm. ZZ. This is Jason. I want you to broadcast a message on the radio to find other survivors in the city. Right now, we're working on resolving things on our end so we can make future decisions based on better intelligence. After saying that, Jason looked at Tommy and asked, "When is Billy coming with the others?" They took the survivors back. I don't think it'll take more than 2 hours for them to meet up with the group outside Atlanta. As soon as he heard those words, Jason's radio crackled. Understood, sir. We'll be broadcasting distress messages. For now, everything is calm on our end. Do you think there are more survivors in this place? Rick asked with a puzzled expression. I don't think so. We've been coming to the city for a long time and haven't found anyone. I doubt anyone will respond, Glenn said, shaking his head at Rick's question. Well, first, we need to save ourselves before worrying about anything else, Rick said as he fell into deep thought. Jason then carefully analyzed the current situation and proposed several escape plans. Plan number 1 was to escape from the roof they had reached and then find a way to climb down from a building further away, slowly and safely reaching the ground. This method requires a lot of strength. Its advantage was safety, but the disadvantage was the climbing skill required, which would slow them down. The second plan is to force their way through and fight their way to the outskirts of the city as quickly as possible. However, they would have to take out a lot of walkers and mutual trust would be essential. If anyone hesitated or failed to take down a walker, the whole beat would be thrown off. Another plan was to send 2 or 3 people to the nearby parking lot to retrieve a truck and drive it back so the entire group could escape together. This method was dangerous, but it would allow them to gather all the supplies they had gathered, making the trip worthwhile. The last thing on Jason's mind was to use the underground pipes, but Jason immediately dismissed this idea. He explained that the underground pipes in the obsolete building were sealed with steel filters, making them impassable without the necessary tools. It wasn't worth wasting time trying this option. Each method had its pros and cons. Jason asked everyone to think carefully and decide which one was the most reliable, considering their abilities. Jason and his people had no issues leaving safely, but there were civilians in the survivor group with different physical conditions. He had to take their abilities into account to ensure a safe journey for everyone. Rick was the first to speak. I think the first 3 methods are feasible, but if we decide to break through by force, we have to move fast and not fail in taking down the infected. So, I vote for the second method, which seems the safest. If I may ask, about the third method, how do you plan to reach the parking lot without causing a commotion like in the first method? Mul's rough voice cut in. It was more realistic than the first and third options, but if they got trapped by walkers or inside a building, it would turn into a suicide mission. But Mul knew Jason wouldn't propose a suicide mission, which is why he wanted answers. He understood that the safest method could also become the most dangerous. Mole felt that if they could walk to the parking lot without problems, their chances of escaping would be higher than with the other options. The third method seems viable, considering our limited equipment and weaponry. If we try to break through by force, things could go south quickly, Tommy said openly. I prepared 3 walkers with their arms and jaws removed at the back of the building. You all know that my team and I came from the CDC, and I've been in contact with the center's latest research. After saying that, Jason pointed out recent studies have shown that once infected individuals have their limbs removed and lose the ability to bite, they become very docile and won't have the instinct to attack us. This way, we can stay close to them and avoid attacks from other walkers nearby. But the trick is, they must not make any noise. Jason explained that this method would be the key to getting to a vehicle. Really? Andrea was a bit skeptical about this unrealistic method. It's true, I saw it with my own eyes. Glenn nodded with certainty and looked at T-Dog and Morales at the same time. The two had also seen it when they ran out and nodded at Andrea in the same way. Are you sure? Rick looked at Jason. He just wanted to see his wife and children as soon as possible, so he was focused on making a safe plan quickly and implementing it right away. Jason nodded and said in a serious tone, I'm quite sure. We've conducted related experiments, and the chances of the infected seeing through the disguise are very small. In this case, unless you accidentally make a sound, the risk is minimal. That sounds good. I'll vote for it. Jackie decided to trust Jason. Me too. Same here. Then, who's going to go? Andrea asked the key question. Mole sat beside her, looking at the others with a mocking gaze, except for Jason and his people, but he remained silent. At this moment, someone had to volunteer. Jason simply took the initiative and said, since I came up with the idea, I'll be the one to go. I'm going too, Tommy said with a determined look, but Jason's words immediately ruled him out of the mission. No, I need you two to stay here and make sure everything is in order. After speaking, he turned his head and looked at Rick. Are you coming? Rick nodded when he heard the words, agreeing without hesitation. Whether Rick was a cop or not, he always had a strong sense of justice, which made people willing to follow him. Seeing Rick nod, Jason looked around until his gaze finally landed on Mole. He raised an eyebrow and looked at him. Mole, are you coming? Mole shrugged indifferently and replied, I don't care. If you need me, I'll go. I definitely won't be a coward like these idiots who just stood there speechless. Everyone's expressions darkened. Although Mole's words were unpleasant, they were true. If Jason hadn't volunteered to go, no one else here would have dared to take such a dangerous risk on their own. In reality, Mole wasn't very afraid of the walkers. They moved slowly and didn't fit his idea of true danger. Even though there were a lot of them, in Mole's mind, he looked down on these mindless creatures. Seeing the downcast expressions of the people in front of him only made him want to leave this place, even if it meant stepping into walker territory. On the other hand, Jason was providing knowledge about what could be done to survive. Muggle's dissatisfaction with Jason had silently faded quite a bit at this moment. At least his requests didn't seem self-serving, so he would help. Now that the plan was set, the three of them stopped wasting time and went downstairs to prepare. Jason and the others quickly reached the back door of the building, dragged the 3 still warm corpses they had tied up earlier toward the exit, and asked Glenn to find 3 oversized jackets. After thinking about what he was about to do, Jason handed his gun to Tommy, put on some gloves, and stabbed the 3 corpses multiple times. Now, put on the gloves and smear the jackets with some blood, Jason instructed the other 2 while wiping the blood off his hands onto the jacket he was wearing. What's the point of this? Andrea asked with a disgusted expression. We'll have an extra layer to cover our scent. If there were only a few walkers outside, we wouldn't need to do this. But if the streets are packed with them, like the horde we saw earlier, this will give us an extra layer of protection. Jason patiently explained these survival techniques. He would teach everyone little by little in the future. And so, soon enough, There was a line of 6 figures on the streets of Atlanta, 3 humans, each holding a walker by a rope tied around its neck. "It's like I'm walking my dog." Mole couldn't help but joke. Rick just frowned upon hearing those words from Merle's mouth. That man was definitely an idiot. According to the plan, Jason would drive. Once they arrived at the destination, Rick and Mole would try to get the keys. The 3 moved slowly, and the parking lot fence in front of them was getting closer. On the rooftop, everyone was lying on the edge of the fence, watching the 3 figures closely. As they got closer and closer to the parking lot, everyone grew more and more excited. Boom! But at that moment, thunder exploded over Atlanta, signaling that rain was approaching. What were the chances of something like this happening? Jason looked up at the sky. The rain was inevitable, just as it would be in reality. Even though he had tried to speed up the process as much as possible, he lacked the right perception, and this was something truly impossible to predict. Moreover, from his own perspective, he could be certain that he had arrived at the building later than in the original story. But that was only his own perception, nothing related to reality. Now, based on his visual inspection, he discovered that the parking lot wasn't too far away. Jason made a few hand signals, reminding the 2 people beside him of the situation and what they needed to do. Pointing at the sky, everyone understood that it was very likely going to rain. After signaling, Jason tightened his grip on the rope in his hand and slowly pulled the walker behind him closer. Seeing Jason's movements, Rick and Mole did the same, pulling their ropes and bringing the walkers closer. The 3 moved about 10 more meters, and it wasn't long before raindrops started hitting their heads. Jason glanced back and noticed that the walkers around them were starting to thin out, so he raised 2 fingers, signaling everyone to pick up the pace. Jason had asked Mole and Rick to stay alert to their surroundings. Anything could happen during this adrenaline-fueled walk, and when faced with those horrible-looking walkers, very few people could remain calm. Finally, they reached the edge of the fence without incident. The 3 tossed the ropes from their hands, and Jason let the other 2 climb over first. At least they knew how to take initiative instead of arguing. No one here would waste time voting on who should go first. That's why when Jason stepped aside to let them pass, they did so without a word. The sound of the wire fence clattering instantly shattered the silence of the quiet street. Almost immediately, all the nearby walkers turned their rotten, blood-covered faces toward them, and even the ones farther away followed suit. With a cold expression, Jason drew his modified pistol and a knife from his vest and began moving without waiting for the closest walkers to catch up. He knew all too well that he couldn't fight the walkers right next to the metal fence, otherwise, the cramped space could put him at a disadvantage, making it difficult to deal with them if they piled up. With a grim smile, Jason plunged his knife into the first nearby walker. His hand moved so quickly that the cut was clean, and blood spurted onto the ground. Crack! With his dagger-piercing skulls, Jason refrained from using his gun for the time being. He needed to clear the sidewalk area near the fence to ensure a safe climb. Soon, the walkers began to drop rapidly. These were much slower than the ones he had faced in the hospital and before climbing the building. According to Edwin Jenner, at least in Europe, there were infected who were faster and could do incredible things, like climbing or opening doors. Although Glenn and the others on top of the building were far away, they could still vaguely see someone among the walkers. Glenn lifted his binoculars for a closer look and exclaimed, "It's Jason! He's taking down the walkers." From what I see, he protected Mole and Rick while they climbed the metal fence. Will they be okay? Jason is a good leader. As the chief captain responsible for the CDC security, he'll protect his friends. Don't worry. Tommy recalled how Jason had always taken the lead when they began expanding, just as he was doing now. Even though the military had withdrawn, Jason had chosen to risk his life to save them from imminent death. Everyone at the CDC respected him deeply. Thanks to his skills and keen observations, many people had food to eat and a comfortable bed to sleep in. The others on the rooftop also watched the scene from afar, but all they could see was a lone figure dressed in black, cutting down several walkers. They couldn't help but be amazed by the skills these soldiers had displayed so far. They were still at the stage where they couldn't kill walkers without firearms. When had they ever seen someone using just a knife to take down so many walkers? After a few more minutes, they saw Jason finishing off the nearby walkers before turning and running at full speed. From a distance, Jason sprinted, stepping onto the fence, and in 2 swift steps, using his strong arms, he leaped over the barrier. On the other side of the fence, Rick and Merle, who had just jumped over, were about to turn back to support Jason, thinking he was in trouble. But they also had to face enemies on their side. By the time they had dealt with them, Jason had already vaulted over the fence. Rick nodded at the others, turned around, and ran toward the parking lot in search of the key box. As for Merle, he crawled like a worm along the ground, and when he turned back to the fence, he saw Jason taking down multiple walkers with his knife. Merle secretly felt lucky to have met someone so strong and ruthless, someone who could understand his way of thinking and his view of this world. Back at the building, Merle had hesitated when he realized the situation was dire. This guy was truly someone to be feared. That thought crossed Merle's mind, and then he reminded himself that he and Jason were on the same side. He would need to pay attention to him in the future. After crossing the fence, Jason didn't immediately run to the truck. Instead, he pulled out the grenade he had taken from the tank. Boom! The massive explosion echoed across the area, and the walkers slowly moved toward the parking lot. The grenade's explosion was sudden. Jason then drew his gun and started taking out the nearest walkers. Bang! 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 In an instant, he emptied his magazine without stopping. He quickly holstered his weapon and sprinted toward the truck. By then, Rick had already grabbed the keys. He ran toward the truck, signaled to Merle that everything was ready, and Jason reached out to catch the keys thrown to him. Vroom! The truck roared to life, and as soon as the two got in, Jason didn't drive off immediately. Instead, he honked the horn. The sharp sound once again pierced the silent street, carrying far into the distance. The walkers drawn by the explosion couldn't help but move even faster. It lasted only a few seconds. Then Jason stopped hesitating, turned the wheel, and the truck sped toward another exit from the parking lot. Crash! The gate of the parking lot burst open, and the truck sped away. The people on the building's rooftop anxiously watched, trying to understand what was happening. When they saw the truck leaving the parking lot and finally picking up speed, they couldn't help but cheer. Amazing! Thank God! They did it! Let's get ready, Tommy said as they started descending the building. Inside the truck, Rick sat in the passenger seat while Merle leaned forward between the front seats. Jason, did you honk just now to draw the walkers away from the parking lot? Since Merle figured it was beneficial to be around Jason, his usual sarcasm seemed to have toned down considerably. Well, we need to circle around the area and hope the walkers at the building's entrance head toward the parking lot. That way, we'll have enough time to pick up the others. Rick silently nodded for a moment before suddenly turning to Jason with a serious expression. Thanks to your plan, we'll be able to get out of here safely. Turning his head slightly, Rick's eyes were filled with sincerity. Jason gave a faint smile and said nothing, merely reaching out to pat Rick's shoulder. Can you two stop being so sentimental? I'm afraid the truck might break down, and everything will go to hell. Jason picked up the radio. Everyone, get ready. We're about to move. About 10 minutes later, gunfire erupted near the building's side door, followed by Merle's voice. Open the door. Open the damn door. Do you still want to get out of this place or not? Everyone rushed to open the side door. At that moment, the walkers that had been pounding on the main entrance finally crashed through the glass. They quickly lifted the shutter, tossed their bags into the truck, and climbed aboard. Jason's group opened fire on the approaching walkers before jumping into the truck. ZZ. We're heading toward your position. Are there any updates we should know about? Tommy asked over the radio, trying to get information on the convoy that had been waiting. After leaving the city of Atlanta, those close to Jason knew that this was not the end of their problems, as there were still many issues to resolve. "Sir, the captain of the 3rd Expedition Group has joined us. We're now informing him about what we've discovered." Shortly after, the voice of Tommy's friend, Billy, came through the radio. "Tommy, I caught up on the situation from the soldiers who stayed behind trying to communicate via radio with potential survivors. Only one group of refugees in the city responded to our call." Hearing that a group of survivors had answered their call, Tommy felt somewhat relieved that there were still people who trusted those from the outside world. "All right, I'll inform the boss, and we'll decide what to do once we meet up." "Understood. We'll be waiting," Billy replied in a serious tone. Upon hearing this, everyone inside the truck Jason was driving turned to look at Tommy and the other person beside him. Truth be told, they didn't fully understand what was happening. Jason, sitting in the driver's seat, had heard the radio report and figured that the survivors were likely from the nursing home in Atlanta. He had originally planned to rescue them along with many other survivors, but he once again faced the same issue: he didn't know their exact location. Now that he knew where these people were, he was determined to save them all. "Rick, I'll have to delay your reunion with your family for a few more hours. We have to go back to the city." "What? Are you planning to go back? Have you lost your mind?" Rick couldn't believe it. The group they had entered Atlanta for was now safe, but they had barely escaped with their lives. Now Jason was saying he wanted to return to that walker-infested place, leaving many in total disbelief. Mull also looked at Jason with slight surprise, wondering what was going through the mind of this man he had just met. "Listen. When my group and I were broadcasting messages over the radio offering help to survivors, we didn't think anyone would actually have access to a radio. But one group responded, and as you just heard, there are refugees not far from where we were." Jason looked at the report Tommy handed him and told the others, "The refuge is a nursing home. There's still a group of young people and some elderly people surviving together, and I won't abandon them." As Jason drove back toward the city, he explained in detail why he wanted to delay their return to the quarry. Everyone remained silent upon hearing this, and though they said nothing, Jason knew what many of them were thinking. Some elderly people could no longer take care of themselves, meaning they would only consume resources in a shelter and require additional manpower to look after them. Was this really worth it? When Jason learned about this group of survivors in the original story, he was pleasantly surprised and respected those who had stayed behind to defend the refuge until the very end. Now that he had the chance to save these people, he also considered the trustworthy individuals protecting that shelter during these desperate times. I'm sure many of you are thinking the same thing, that, in the long run, these people could become a burden, right? Those who have lived through this hell over the past month understand how difficult it is to survive, even while young and strong. But your experience is far from enough. Many things can happen in the future, which is why we need as many people as possible on our side to resist what is destroying the world. Jason smiled slightly and continued, "I don't want to turn my back on good people just because it's convenient. At the very least, these people are a decent group that deserves to be saved. I can't stand the idea of leaving these elderly people behind. They lack food, medicine, and supplies. At this rate, they'll waste away. There are many of them. Most are relatives or friends, people who didn't know what to do and finally decided to protect that place." Jason explained at length, and after hearing him, no one spoke. Instead, they remained deep in thought, their expressions unreadable. "I'm going with you," Murrell suddenly said. Jason turned his head and looked at Murrell, feeling slightly surprised to hear him take the initiative. Ever since Jason had asserted his authority on the rooftop, Murrell had been behaving differently, not doing anything out of the ordinary. But Jason had always kept an eye on him, trying to figure out what he was thinking. Now, with Murrell unexpectedly offering to join him, Jason, who had been about to ask something, paused. Given Murrell's personality, he would probably only reveal his true reason when they were alone, so there was no need to waste words now. In the distance, Jason saw a long line of military vehicles waiting for their arrival, about 8 Hums equipped with machine guns and more than 30 soldiers. Half of the CDC security forces were stationed there, this time alongside Billy Butcher. "All right, everyone, get ready to get off the truck." When everyone heard Jason's words, they packed their backpacks. At that moment, trucks and several military vehicles were already waiting there. "Hey, Morgan, are you comfortable?" Jason got off the truck and greeted Morgan, who was in the shooting port of the modified RV, which served as the command center for his people in this location. "I'm fine. Everything has been quiet here since you left. Only a few walkers passed by, but your people took care of them. Are these the survivors you're rescuing?" Morgan examined the people getting off the truck one by one. Meanwhile, the people he mentioned stared in awe at the military trucks and vehicles equipped with heavy machine guns, guarded by real soldiers. They were real military personnel. They had thought the nation's power was lost, but it seemed there were still people fighting for the salvation of not just this country, but all of humanity. "Sir, we're ready to move out." Billy approached Jason and reported with a serious expression. "Good, let's move before it gets dark." After exchanging greetings, Jason knew that Morgan was already informed about their next plan. "So, Morgan, you guys can head back while we move out. Do you want me to come with you?" Morgan asked. After hearing Jason's plan, he didn't object and instead supported him. Jason shook his head and said, "You still have a wife and son, so there's no need to take risks. It's better if you head back to camp with Glenn and the others first. Leave the heavy work to us." At that moment, Rick also approached with an apologetic expression and said, "Sorry, Jason, I need to go back to camp first to see Lori and Carl. I really want to go with you, but Rick, I understand, you don't need to explain." "I'm sorry, Jason. No, maybe things will get ugly in the city this time. I have my team, and we can operate safely because of our training. Besides, Mul is coming with me. That help is more than enough. Thank you for everything you're doing. I mean it." Rick was grateful for the help Jason offered, not just to him but to everyone who needed it. He believed that if it weren't for Jason, he wouldn't have made it this far. "It's fine. We'll talk later. It's getting late, we need to move quickly." After Mul Dixon finished playing around with some weapons, the whole group set out on their journey. Inside a Humvee, Jason sat in the back seat, with Mul beside him. Crack! 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 After running over some walkers on the road, Jason said, "Go ahead and say whatever's on your mind." Mul rubbed his chin and, after hesitating, spoke slowly, "Man, I'm not a good person. In today's world, if I ran into a survivor on the road, I might kill them first and then loot their stuff. I have my own principles and my own way of dealing with people. But after spending some time with you, I have a feeling it's a good idea to listen to you. I can follow your orders, but if you ever make me do something I hate, then my brother and I will leave your group. Don't doubt it, we can survive on our own." Mul expressed his thoughts. In this completely new world, he believed that Jason's power and leadership style were the right way forward. "You can do whatever you want, just remember one thing. Follow the main rules that you'll learn later, and you'll be free to act as you please. I need determined people like you and your brother." Jason looked at Mul, who was sitting beside him. Mul smirked slightly at the response. Looking into Jason's eyes, he felt that this man had lived through all sorts of things. It reminded him of the feeling he got while hunting, staring directly into the eyes of truly terrifying beasts. And Jason's eyes, by far, belonged to the most dangerous living being he had ever encountered, a human who had lived and done it all. But that feeling was fleeting. When he looked at Jason again, Mul realized that his expression had returned to something completely normal. "Relax, I don't like violence and blood. It gives me a strange feeling, Jason said with a fake smile. Mul chuckled awkwardly, but his forced grin was ugly. At that moment, Jason seemed even more terrifying than before. In a nursing home in Atlanta, Guillermo was tending to an elderly man in the lobby of the building where they had been surviving until now. He was the leader of this place, and as such, he always had to ensure nothing happened to these seniors. A man named Felipe was also standing next to him, helping to support an elderly woman with white hair who looked at them with concern. This place had actually been a nursing home before the world ended. In the early days of the outbreak, when everything started, all the staff had fled. Now, only Felipe and Guillermo remained, with the latter being a security guard back then. In those first days, after the world collapsed, many children and grandchildren of the elderly came here. When they saw that many people had been abandoned after the staff left, and since there was nowhere safe to run to, they decided to stay and continue taking care of the seniors. Fortunately, while some of the elderly suffered from Alzheimer's, most of them were still mentally sound. They were simply old people who just wanted to find a quiet place to live out their final years. So, everyone persisted and endured their hardships to the very end. At that moment, a young teenager ran inside, whispering something to Guillermo. "It's true, help is here." A smile appeared on Guillermo's face, and he followed the young man to the front courtyard. Outside, a convoy of military Hums and large trucks was parked outside the shelter. A man who seemed to be the highest-ranking officer approached, extended his hand, and said in a serious tone, "I'm Captain Jason. I am currently in charge of protecting what remains of the CDC and any refugees in need of help. You can rest assured, I've come to take you to a safer place where you will lack nothing." A few minutes ago, the large convoy of military vehicles entered the city with extreme caution, correctly evading the massive horde of walkers still gathered in the parking lot, where Jason and the others had previously taken the truck that got them out of the city. That was why they could now drive with more ease, though they still maintained a regulated speed. As they advanced further, the sound of car and truck engines echoed through the silent streets. Everyone felt a mix of slight fear and excitement about what might happen in this place. Their hearts pounded intensely, the breaths of those stationed at the machine guns were restrained, and all eyes were fixed on the road ahead. Seeing that their destination was getting closer, Jason grabbed the radio and began issuing orders regarding the necessary precautions. "This is your captain speaking. If things get complicated, do not use heavy weapons. We need to take down the walkers as quietly as possible. Once we reach the extraction zone, position the vehicles strategically and keep your eyes wide open. Send out scouting teams to secure the area and stay informed about the surroundings." The reminders were transmitted over the radio, and everyone listened attentively, nodding silently. Their marching speed slowed slightly to avoid being caught off guard. After communicating with the shelter they were set to evacuate, Jason, based on reports, knew the exact street and location where the refugees were. Since the shelter had exposed itself in a very careless and obvious manner, Jason realized just how desperate they must be. "We're approaching the location. Secure the perimeter and start clearing all the walkers in the area." Since Jason's group consisted of more than 20 soldiers, it included leaders for groups of 6, responsible for giving precise instructions and ensuring everyone's safety. This command structure made Jason's job easier, and the group leaders were Billy, Tommy, and Sam Valdez. 2 of the leaders quickly began issuing orders, and all the soldiers exited the vehicles, except for those stationed at the machine guns and in the driver's seats. Everyone swiftly got out and started eliminating all the walkers in the vicinity. The vehicles were strategically positioned to allow for a quick escape if things went wrong. Jason approached the shelter door with several soldiers at his back. He knocked, then took a step back and waited silently. "We're evacuating refugees. We've arrived to assist civilians. The situation outside is not favorable, so time is of the essence," Tommy announced in a deep voice to the people inside. Seeing that no response came, Jason stepped forward and added, "I'm Captain Jason. I am currently responsible for protecting what remains of the CDC and any refugees in need of help. You can rest assured, we're here to take you to a safer place where you won't lack anything. Just when they thought the refugees would hesitate longer, a young man opened the shelter door and said, "You can come in and take a look. We're facing some difficulties." Jason frowned and entered the shelter with a small group of soldiers. He didn't recall anything significant happening in the early days after Rick had woken up, which only deepened his doubts. Upon entering, Jason saw many people, most of them of Latin descent, many with tattoos on their bodies and especially on their faces. "I thought no one would come to help us in this place. We're happy to finally see someone from the government after months without contact." A black man approached Jason and the others with a somewhat serious expression. From his appearance, Jason knew this was Guillermo. When Jason saw Guillermo, he stepped forward and extended his hand in greeting. The reason he was here was to have these reliable people by his side. He was confident in trusting those who took care of this place and was also counting on their support to back him as a leader. "My name is Jason. We're evacuating refugees trapped in the city to a safe location. Our convoy is stationed and ready to move." Jason looked around and introduced himself. "I'm Guillermo. I take care of this place." Guillermo examined the soldiers' uniforms with slight confusion. These uniforms were different from those of the usual military personnel. "Guillermo, it's time to move. There are vehicles outside to transport everyone from this shelter." Jason had no intention of wasting time and got straight to the point. "As we mentioned over the radio, we have some elderly people who have difficulty walking. Do you have a solution?" Guillermo still hesitated. After all, they had put in great effort to protect this place and weren't keen on leaving it behind under uncertain conditions. Jason signaled with his hand, nodding toward Mole, who was standing behind him. Mole turned and stepped outside. "Don't worry, we're prepared." Not long after, Mole returned with several soldiers carrying stretchers and wheelchairs. They were ready for this because they had been assisting elderly individuals who couldn't move on their own. Jason had anticipated the possibility of encountering Guillermo's group, so he came prepared. In the past, there had been reasons not to help those who supported him, mainly because Jason had not been prepared. But now, he could say that he was. Seeing this, Guillermo stopped hesitating. He turned to Miguel and said, "Go in and inform everyone. Tell them to pack their things immediately and come help transport the elderly." Miguel nodded and quickly ran into the area where the others were gathered. As soon as Guillermo extended his hand, gesturing toward a room to continue their discussion, the three of them walked toward the backyard. Mole rarely acted strangely on the road, and his face was less hostile. At that moment, he was just an ordinary person who looked a bit like a ruffian. Now, Mole was silently observing the situation in this shelter. He noticed that there were many young and strong men here, at least 20 of them. After reaching the backyard, he gradually found many women, both young and slightly older. Yes, indeed, these people were mainly responsible for taking care of the elderly and performing various tasks. Then there were the elderly, around a dozen of them, with about 6 or 7 having limited mobility. Mole carefully observed every detail, admiring Jason more and more for his tricks, which perhaps no one else had considered. Compared to the elderly, there were many strong and intimidating-looking men here. With so many young, strong men, as long as they were equipped with weapons, they would be a force not to be underestimated anywhere. And most importantly, all these people would be eternally grateful to Jason for saving the elderly in this shelter, ensuring that he had reliable people under his command from now on. Mole noticed that Jason was walking more slowly and had already reached his side. Knowing that Jason had something to say, he listened as Jason whispered, "How does it feel?" Mole smiled and replied, "I think it's pretty good." Hearing Mole's response, Jason knew that he understood his hidden intentions. Mole was very smart but simply hadn't set his mind on the right path in the original story. Soon, some people arrived at the room where Guillermo had led them. People were moving around, packing their belongings. "I don't have much to bring, just some clothes," Guillermo said openly, pointing at his backpack. "Guillermo, I will be separating from you because I must go to a place where there are more survivors. The elderly will be moved to a safe location and will be protected by half of my men." Guillermo nodded, indicating it was not a problem, but still frowned and said, "All right, that's fine." Mull also spoke with some confusion. "Jason, is the place you're managing really that big?" "There's nothing to worry about. The shelter my group oversees is large enough to house many people. The CDC is the safest place in the country," Jason reassured them, knowing that with all these people, the shelter would continue to expand. Seeing that everything was secure, everyone nodded in relief. That night, Jason's group split into two teams again. One drove straight to the CDC, while the other headed to the quarry. After a busy afternoon, Guillermo's people finally evacuated with everyone to the CDC. This time, he decided to stay with Jason to help however he could, while the others went directly to the shelter. At that moment, many people were standing at the entrance of the camp, led by Rick and Morgan. Jason jumped out of the truck, smiled, and greeted the two of them. Behind them were the people who had been at the Atlanta Mall before, and they all approached and hugged Jason one by one. There were no unnecessary words. At this moment, just being alive was the best news. Laurie also approached, greeted Jason, and said with a smile, "It's been over a month, and we finally meet again." Jason smiled and hugged Laurie as she stepped forward, and she continued to thank him. 6 soldiers and Guillermo got out of the Hums and greeted everyone. After exchanging pleasantries, everyone gathered in the open space at the center. Jason looked around. The open space was now surrounded by at least dozens of people. Jason understood that not everyone was familiar with the situation, but he believed everything would improve over time. Looking at the dozens of people before him, he suddenly felt that his efforts had not been in vain. These people were the foundation, the base for survival in the future. After gathering information, Jason learned that the camp had always been led by Shane, but at that moment, most of the people there had been brought in by him. The atmosphere was a bit strange, and many were waiting to hear what Jason was going to say next. Without waiting for everyone to start asking questions, Jason slowly walked to the center of the open space, and his deep voice echoed in everyone's ears. "Many of you here don't know me. Allow me to introduce myself. My name is Jason. I am a former Special Forces soldier, and right now, I am protecting a CDC facility where I will take care of all of you until we figure out what to do next. When the outbreak happened, I did everything I could to secure the CDC. Fortunately, during one of my operations, I came into contact with some of the people here. My resources only allowed me to save a limited number of people, so you are the last ones I can take in for now." As he spoke, Jason observed everyone's expressions. Doubt, confusion, fear, every kind of emotion appeared on their faces, so Jason paused and continued. "It pains me to be the one to say this, but the world will undergo massive changes from now on. The world you knew no longer exists. While at the CDC, we made contact with departments in other countries still searching for a cure, but they are no better off than we are right now. In these circumstances, all we can do is survive together. We can work together and overcome the challenges ahead. The initial situation may not be worse than what you've faced here, but your lives will be very different. However, I can assure you that in a short time, you will no longer fear this new world. The plan is simple. We will stay here tonight, and tomorrow morning, we will head to the CDC. Once there, you will receive training, and each of you will learn to master the basic survival skills necessary to make it through this crisis. Of course, no one will be forced to stay. If you want to take your chances and go your own way, tomorrow will be the time for you to decide. No matter what your choice is, beware of strangers, and remember, fear the living more than the dead." Jason paused again, his serious expression raising the spirits of everyone present, as they all watched him with concern. "Remember, the world as we knew it has come to an end." The next morning, after a whole night of thinking, several people went to meet Jason. The first was Morales. While Jason was discussing arrangements with Rick, Shane, Guillermo, and others, Morales brought his family to see him. Morales' arrival was expected. They had originally planned to leave and reunite with their relatives. In the original story, nothing more was known about them until later, when it was revealed that all his family members had died, leaving Morales as the sole survivor. After losing everything, he joined Negan and was ultimately killed by Daryl. He was a poor man who would suffer greatly, but who wasn't a poor soul in these times. "We want to follow you." Jason stood beside Rick, looked at Morales, and said, "Remember, everyone only gets 2 chances. Don't break the rules, you'll learn later, and everything will be fine. Once we settle at the CDC, we'll have a better idea of how to proceed." Rick hesitated for a moment, walked over to a backpack, and handed Morales a gun. Morales was grateful and left with his family. Next came a man and a woman whom Jason didn't recognize. They hadn't appeared in the original story, but they were here now. It turned out they had joined Shane when he told them he had a contact within the government, but now they had decided to take their chances and search for their own families. Jason also gave them a gun and a machete. After saying their goodbyes, the two left, but since they didn't have a car, they took one from the camp and drove away. After that, a few more people came to see them one by one, but Jason didn't try to persuade them to stay. No one else wanted to leave. Everyone knew the chances of surviving out there were very slim. While Jason was with his group, they received a radio report confirming that everyone had arrived safely, so there was nothing left to worry about. A few hours later, the last person to approach him was a young woman named Amy. "Jason, my name is Amy. Can I have a word with you?" Amy walked up to Jason, looking somewhat nervous. The people around her were unfamiliar, so she asked and waited for his response. "Of course, Amy." Seeing Amy's nervous expression, Jason was slightly puzzled and curious. Amy took a few steps away from the cars where Jason was standing and then spoke. "Jason, first of all, I have to thank you and your people for saving my sister. Andrea mentioned you. Thank you for helping her." Jason understood and replied, "There's nothing to thank me for. I was just trying to survive, so you can see it as mutual aid. No, you could have abandoned them or used them. I think thanking you is the right thing to do. After all, nothing forces you to save people, even if you have a government job. The law no longer applies, right?" Amy's expression was complicated. She had probably thought a lot about this situation. After saying that, Amy looked up at Jason and hesitantly asked, "By the way, haven't we met before? You seem very familiar." "I don't remember anything like that. People used to confuse me a lot with a famous actor. Maybe I just have a resemblance," Jason said, adopting a thoughtful expression as he looked at her. "Ha, I never thought about that." Amy smiled slightly. Jason, on the other hand, had no idea what was going on. Just as he was about to turn around, Jason felt someone grab his arm. He looked at Amy in surprise. Had someone really fallen for him at a time like this? No, he also knew those clever tactics women used out of fear of being abandoned. Who wouldn't seek out a strong man or woman for protection? "I remember now. You were with a group from the CDC, collecting something in that house, right?" "Oh. I remember now. You were that sister duo." Realizing that she had recognized him, Jason pretended to have just realized it as well, slightly changing his expression. "Now I remember seeing Andrea at that time. She was driving, and you were in the passenger seat." Yes. Amy clapped her hands, finding it incredible that they had reunited by chance. Suddenly, a scream came from deep within the forest. Jason quickly turned his head, frowned, looked at the others, and signaled them to be ready. Without glancing at Amy again, he walked toward the source of the sound. Rick and Shane rushed ahead with their weapons drawn. "What happened?" "Laurie." Several people quickly ran toward the bushes behind the camp. Rick realized it was Laurie and Carol and hurried to check on them. Jason stepped into the bushes and discovered that it was just a walker biting into a deer carcass. By that time, the rest of the group had also arrived. Tommy and another soldier approached to see what was going on. Most of the people's expressions changed, they all seemed very tense. Right then, the walker was kneeling on the ground, chewing on the deer's corpse. It seemed unaware of the scream. Jason sighed, thinking it was something more serious. He pulled out a knife and walked toward the figure. As he got close to the walker, he kicked it. Only then did the walker stop eating and turn its head. Crack! Before it could do anything, Jason's dagger plunged fiercely into its eye socket. The walker instantly froze and collapsed to the ground with a dull thud. Just as Rick was about to speak, he saw Jason suddenly raise his hand to signal silence, then slip into the bushes. Jason had heard some kind of movement. He had a hunch it was Daryl, but he couldn't rule out any other danger. Merle's brother was one of the most beloved characters among fans of this world. His development throughout the story had been great, and despite not originally being planned for the series, he had become a truly special man. But at this moment, the Daryl didn't exist yet. He had much to learn and many things to change. That's why Jason wanted to leave a strong first impression. Daryl was in a foul mood at that moment. A deer he had tracked had escaped. He was sure he had shot it, but after searching for a long time, he couldn't find it. After cutting through some bushes blocking the deer's trail, Daryl stepped through, and the camp was right ahead. Thinking about this, Daryl snapped another branch out of his way. But suddenly, a dark figure leaped out of the bushes and aimed a gun at him. Instinctively, he raised the crossbow in his hands and saw that the other person was silently staring at him. He frowned and considered his next move. "Are you with the camp up ahead?" Jason asked, pretending not to recognize the man before him. "What if I am?" Daryl responded coldly. A long silence followed before Jason replied. "If you're with them, I'll lower my weapon. If you're not, I'll keep it raised." Rick and the others, thinking there were more walkers, arrived shortly after, only to find Jason pointing a gun at Daryl. Daryl! Shane recognized him instantly and was surprised to see their confrontation. He quickly explained to Jason. "Jason, this is one of ours. He's Merle's younger brother, Daryl." Only then did Jason pretend to suddenly realize and quickly lower his gun. "Oh, sorry. I thought an enemy was trying to attack the camp. My bad, man." Daryl, with a grim expression, lowered his crossbow and walked toward the deer. After some explanations from everyone, Daryl finally understood the current situation at the camp. He never imagined that after being away for just a few days, things would have changed so much. Right now, he was only chasing a deer that had escaped through the bushes. That was the only thing that mattered to him. The most shocking part was seeing that a walker was dead right next to his prey. Daryl was furious about being ambushed by a stranger and having a gun pointed at his head. Now, seeing that all his effort to hunt the deer had been wasted, he couldn't help but explode with rage. Jason, standing to the side, watched as Daryl stepped forward and began kicking the dead walker fiercely, cursing from time to time. "You filthy, disgusting thing. You bit my deer. Son of a bitch. It's dead, stop it." Dale grabbed Daryl, trying to calm him down. But Daryl shook off Dale's hand and roared angrily, "What do you know? Old man. Who? Do you have any idea how long it took me to track this deer?" Even after yelling, he was still furious and kicked the walker a few more times. Suddenly, Daryl thought of something and pointed at the bitten area on the deer with a questioning tone. "Do you think it'd be fine if we cut this part off and eat the rest?" Even though Daryl had yelled at Dale, the old man, being a good guy, didn't take it personally and still answered him, "It's not worth the risk, so forget about it." Daryl only showed a regretful expression when he heard Jason's voice behind him. "Well, considering the time of the bite, it wouldn't be too bad to eat it. If we discard half of the body, it could still be edible." Jason understood that the virus in this world was lethal. He didn't know if a cure could be found in the future, but if the most affected part was discarded and the meat was well cooked, everyone could eat it without getting infected. It was known that for someone to be infected by the virus, it had to enter the bloodstream. That's why cannibals hadn't been infected, even after eating human flesh that should have been contaminated. When Daryl heard Jason's words, the anger in his chest flared up again, thinking his words were full of mockery. "Did you just say it's fine to eat the meat?" He said it's fine because he knows more than we do. He's more familiar with the virus, he's from the CDC. He knows that because he takes care of the scientists who are still looking for a cure, Rick suddenly said after thinking it through. "Who the hell are you?" "Rick Grimes." "Rick Grimes? You the new neighborhood cop?" Daryl sneered, looking at Rick in his sheriff's uniform. "Just a friendly county officer." "Brother, you're back?" A hoarse voice sounded. Mull had also heard the commotion and walked over. "Murrell, why are there so many weirdos in the camp? Come on, help me clean these squirrels." Daryl ignored the deer on the ground, walked toward Murrell, and showed him his catch. Murrell glanced at Jason and said, "I'll talk to him." Jason didn't care in the slightest, so after making sure there was no more danger, he returned to camp. Due to this incident, the camp's atmosphere was a bit tense. Everyone discussed it and decided to stay one more night, but Jason dismissed those words. Jason didn't want to waste any more time in this place when he had things to take care of at the CDC, so he suggested that everyone calm down and leave once they were ready. He didn't know when or how another attack might happen in this camp, and he wasn't ready to lose valuable allies he might need later. Jason climbed into his RV and saw George listening to music. He smiled and greeted him. "How are you? Everything okay?" "Hey, boss, everything's great. Looks like dealing with new survivors is tough, huh?" George had heard all the drama from earlier. There are some tough guys in this camp, but they might be useful later. Jason shook his head, dealing with people he already knew was harder than he had expected. Hearing that they were about to leave, everyone started preparing. They understood that Jason had his own responsibilities and couldn't stay away from the CDC for more than a day. After nearly an hour of preparation, everyone was resting while getting the squirrels ready to cook. This would be their last night in this place, so they talked about everything that had happened. While everyone was chatting, Jason and Shane spoke away from the group. This time, they were about to leave for the CDC, and Jason wanted to make a few things clear to Shane. "The place I protect has several rules. Are there any unstable people here? You've known these people longer, so I want to know what you think." Hearing Jason's words, Shane understood what he was asking. To be honest, he had faced the same challenges when trying to keep order in the camp without knowing anyone well. Everyone's relatively calm. If I had to point out anyone, it'd be Mull and Ed Palatier. But as long as they follow the rules, there won't be any problems. Shane looked into the distance and asked, "How many people are in your shelter?" After thinking for a moment, Jason finally answered, "Well, I don't know exactly, but we could easily be around 500 people with us. Then, if the place is that big, we need to create new shelters. We need to expand, for the sake of the future," Jason added with a thoughtful expression. "All right, we'll do that later. See you around." Shane nodded and walked away from Jason's RV. Hearing those words, Jason remained silent. He knew Shane could be very useful in the future, so he decided to consider him in his more important plans. "I don't like this place. We should go back as soon as possible," George added with a calm look. Jason looked at George and nodded. If he remembered correctly, this place would soon be attacked by walkers, and that was something he wanted to avoid. Many could get hurt. After a few more hours, Jason approached the group and said, "All right, we're heading to the CDC now. Once we arrive, everyone will undergo a blood test to confirm they're not infected with the virus. After that, you'll have food, water, a bed, and safety. There's still a long road ahead. Let's stick together and stay on course. Jason looked at everyone and prepared to set off for the CDC. Jason recognized that many people here wouldn't be the same as they were in the original story. His changes to events were creating an entirely different timeline. He just hoped that, in this one, a cure for this nightmare could exist. That was the only way humanity could be saved. Jason had been away for too long and needed to check on his shelter. Since the next phase of development was underway, there were new refugees that needed monitoring, and he would handle that as soon as he arrived. Everyone has a lot to learn, but that can be done slowly. We're not exactly in a rush. Jason knew he didn't need idiots like Ed, and if they caused problems, he wouldn't hesitate to remove obstacles from his path. This trip had brought many benefits. He had gained reliable people. Now, he had to think about expanding his territory. He needed to grow his influence and control his people. He also had to make it clear that they weren't exactly military personnel, they didn't work for the country, and they owed nothing to anyone. Jason was about to announce that this wasn't about the government. If people wanted to eat and drink as much as they wanted, they'd have to work hard for those comforts. For now, he had already identified strong leaders who would follow his orders to the letter: Shane, Guillermo, Mole, and Rick. They were all men with a natural air of leadership, and Jason now had his new captains ready to help him grow his power. ZZ. Remember, everyone is welcome. Don't feel uncomfortable, and let's enjoy ourselves while we can. In this world, we never know when we'll turn into one of those walkers. Now, get ready. As soon as Jason finished speaking, everyone applauded and expressed their agreement with the arrangements made by these soldiers. All right, I appreciate your trust. I can assure you that I will do everything possible to ensure your safety. We will be strong in this new world, and nothing will stop us. Rick stood next to his wife, looking at this friend he had only truly gotten to know a few days ago. He, who used to speak little, was now communicating with those around him, and surprisingly, everyone had confidence that Jason was the one who would lead them out of this hell. At that moment, Rick suddenly realized that Jason was well suited to be a leader. He had a much broader vision than anyone else struggling to survive. He didn't hide behind others, and he was always thinking of ways to improve their situation. We won't achieve that if we leave everything up to just one group of people. Shane's voice came from the side. Rick turned his head to look at his friend and smiled slightly. Yeah, that's why we're going to help him. Although everyone planned to leave the next day, Jason had different thoughts. He ordered everyone to get ready and then walked toward Ed's tent. Need any help? Jason asked with a friendly smile. At that moment, Carol stepped out with a large suitcase and looked at Jason standing not far from her tent. You've already done so much for us. We're very grateful that you decided to take us all in. Jason glanced into the distance and watched Ed loading things into a truck. He then turned back to Carol and said, "One day, you'll have to deal with it. Do you want me to help you with that?" Carol seemed surprised. She had no idea how Jason had figured out her relationship with her husband in just one night. It doesn't matter. I just hope that one day, he changes. I hope so too. But his behavior seems explosive, and that's something that won't be tolerated in the shelter. Jason reached into his vest and pulled out a thin knife, handing it to Carol, who took it with trembling hands. I hope you understand, this world needs strong people. If you want to protect your daughter, you must become a strong woman. After saying that, Jason smiled and returned to his RV to organize his people. He didn't want to interfere too much in Carol and Ed's relationship, but if she didn't resolve that brewing issue, he would take care of it himself and show everyone that his authority in the shelter would not be challenged. When everyone was ready to leave, Jason got into his vehicle, and the journey began. Priority transmission alert? This is an emergency message from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention, Atlanta facility. This shelter remains operational and is capable of receiving refugees. The immediate presence of military personnel or any government agency receiving this transmission is requested to reinforce perimeter and operational security at this designated safe point. This message is retransmitted at regular intervals. If you can hear it, there is still hope. On the road, Jason heard the announcement playing on the radio just as they entered the transmission range. He needed to strengthen his ranks and expand his territory. And the only way to do that was by taking in more refugees, which was why the broadcast played 24/7. Do you have a future plan for the CDC? Morgan leaned against a seat in the RV, feeling a bit tired. He looked at the silent Jason and suddenly asked. From what he had heard, the message on the radio came from the shelter they were heading to. The journey was long, and they had barely spoken about anything until now. He just wanted to know more about the plans in Jason's mind. From his experience, he knew that resources would become a major issue for a shelter with so many people, so he wondered how Jason intended to solve that problem. It was hard to imagine maintaining control in such circumstances. It required incredible authority and a firm hand to manage large groups filled with desperation. Jason looked out the RV window at the road, thought for a moment, and said, before all of this happened, society had many different groups pursuing their own goals. Some of those groups were dangerous, and others didn't care who they had to eliminate as long as they achieved their objectives. As he spoke, he pulled a sheet of paper from his bag and said, "Nowadays, can you imagine how many refugee groups like ours exist in the country? It's only been a few months since the modern world collapsed, and food is already starting to run out. What do you think those groups will do when they encounter smaller ones? It doesn't matter if we're a group of 5 or 20, larger groups will find a way to take what little we have. My goal is to expand our territory, find refugees, and prepare to create a new world within this hell." After briefly explaining his plan, Jason looked at Morgan and Guillermo, who remained silent. "And what about you? Do you think my approach is right?" "I do," Guillermo nodded and said. "We need to move much faster than the others, secure valuable resources before they become scarce, and prepare everyone for the world you're talking about." Jason nodded and said, "While they work on a cure at the CDC, we'll need to expand our forces, train those who don't know how to use a weapon, and prepare for the future. I can only say that I'll help. I want to protect my family, and I won't allow any other group to come into our safe place and cause trouble," Morgan said after receiving a clear explanation from Jason. He thought things were moving too fast, but he also knew that many people wouldn't hesitate to do evil to get what they wanted. Jason nodded and said no more. Seeing that everyone understood his words, he felt relieved about the road ahead. He had to do things right and avoid mistakes. The journey was uneventful. The 8 vehicles encountered no unforeseen problems, and even if they had plenty of security, and everyone was prepared for the worst. Jason's RV, driven by George, led the way, while the rear was protected by 2 Humps with mounted machine guns. By the time they arrived at the CDC, it was getting dark. As they entered the CDC's well-guarded perimeter, Jason's people ensured that security was top-notch. Everyone could see tanks stationed at strategic locations and some streets completely sealed off with metal fences. Humps with machine guns and barricades manned by heavily armed soldiers made the place look extremely secure and reliable. With Jason's presence, they all entered without needing to provide explanations or introduce themselves. The garage door opened in the distance, and a few cars entered while the rest parked outside the CDC. "Jason, you're finally back." Several people in black uniforms approached alongside the Jenners, and Jason stepped forward to greet them. "I'm glad security remains intact in my absence. We'll continue to grow and make sure we have a stronghold for the future." Jason looked at the important scientists with a smile. "There's nothing surprising about it. It's thanks to you that this place is still running and safe." Edwin looked at the people getting out of the vehicles and was surprised to see more survivors. As everyone exited their cars and stood in the garage, the Jenners had already been briefed about many aspects of the future and agreed to establish a shelter as long as Jason remained in control. Jason turned around and addressed everyone. Attention! Everyone here must undergo a blood test. This is an unchangeable rule of the CDC, and it's also for everyone's safety. Once inside the facility, you must not shout. Many researchers are working in the laboratories. These are the lead scientists. This is Dr. Edwin Jenner and his wife, Candice Jenner. They will be responsible for the screenings. After pausing, Jason looked at Rick and Shane. Proceed in an orderly manner. Rick, Shane, organize everyone to keep things under control. Guillermo, once the tests are done, you'll be able to see your friends and family, Jason finally said. Thank you so much, Jason. I got it, Guillermo said, feeling emotional about the security of this place. The elders would definitely be safer here, and there was little to worry about now. In no time, the blood test was completed. Given the urgency of the situation, the refugees were not placed in isolation due to time constraints and the many tasks that needed to be done. For that reason, those who were able returned to the garage and began moving supplies. All the survivors who had arrived in recent days had successfully integrated into the order within the CDC. Now, everyone who had been concerned about the safety of the place felt reassured. Since the US government cut off television signals and civilian networks, the radio had become the only source through which all survivors in the country could obtain information about the outside world. The broadcasts only mentioned safe havens, but everyone feared that these places were not what they seemed. There had been no sightings of military forces or anyone attempting to contain the disaster, indicating that everything was lost. Priority transmission, military forces, to all active military units in the vicinity. A secure refuge has been established at this location. Your immediate presence is requested to reinforce security and maintain order. Facility secured and operational. Research is ongoing for the development of a cure. Access protocol and coordination in progress. Priority. High immediate response required. This message is retransmitted at scheduled intervals. Please respond if you receive this transmission. After discussing a few more things, Tyler, who was overseeing the operations, handed additional manuscripts to the person in charge of transmitting messages. His expression became somewhat unnatural. Anyone who is lost, hungry, or in need of help can come to our facility, where we continue to fight to develop a cure for this virus. After the voice stopped, the recording played again and would continue to do so from that moment on. Whether survivors who could hear the radio or military personnel with nowhere to go, they could come to the CDC seeking refuge. Jason knew this could go wrong, but at least for now, he was willing to take that risk. Everyone knew how terrible it was to survive out there. They all understood the importance of a safe haven and also that achieving it required a great deal of work. This could really backfire on us. We must stay alert and watch out for enemy attacks. Sam, sitting nearby, couldn't help but voice his thoughts. You're right. We can't avoid taking this risk because we're running out of time. We need to start expanding our territory and securing a stable food source. Jason sat down and silently watched the security cameras. Starting tomorrow, all new refugees would be assigned a job. The nearest buildings needed to be cleared, and the controlled area had to be expanded to recover military resources left in the streets. Finally, those closest to him understood why it was important to keep growing. Now, survivors were adapting to this new world, and once they fully adjusted, they would start causing chaos without considering the weaker ones. The various people at the CDC were now much calmer than when they first arrived, and communication among them had also improved. After organizing the supplies, Jason ensured that the newcomers familiarized themselves with the structure of the center and learned which areas were off-limits. Originally, one floor had been designed to accommodate a large number of researchers, but now those vacant spaces were completely filled, housing the new arrivals. Later, Jason called together those responsible for supervising the various tasks, listening to the registry list of the newcomers and their skills. Among Guillermo's group of survivors, many had medical expertise, while others had mechanical knowledge. Some knew how to handle weapons, while others specialized in cooking. Jason took the list of those designated as escorts and assigned them to the guard unit. He knew it was time to stop referring to them as soldiers, so he announced that the community plan needed to be implemented. Once everything was settled, many went to rest while Jason and another group handled security outside the CDC. As the leader of this group struggling to survive, he had to ensure that everything ran smoothly. The next morning, CDC first floor lobby everyone, including the researchers, except for the guards stationed outside, gathered in the hallway, while Jason and the section leaders stood on the stairs. "Everyone is here except for the elders, boss," Tommy said with a calm expression. Jason nodded, and seeing that everyone had arrived, he clapped his hands and spoke loudly so all could hear. "All right, I ask for silence." The room quickly fell quiet, and Jason continued, "I've gathered you all here to inform you about some changes and new rules. I believe everyone slept well last night, didn't they? It was great. I could shower and eat enough. I'm happy this place is safe." Hearing everyone's responses one after another, Jason's tone grew serious. "It seems you all had a good time. Do you think you can continue living this way in the future?" After a brief pause, Jason saw that everyone had fallen silent and asked, "How long do you think this way of life will last? A year, 6 months, or just a few months? I can tell you all right now that the fuel keeping this facility running won't last more than 3 months." At those words, everyone's faces darkened. That short amount of time hit them like a hammer to the chest. They had just rekindled their hope for survival, but Jason's words shattered their illusions. Jason remained calm, seeing that his words had ignited a survival instinct within everyone. He nodded and stated, "That is, of course, if no one else comes and tries to take what we have. We are now a community that will fight to survive in the coming days. Therefore, I now announce that our community will be called SCT. We are the Survey Corps troops. We must protect each other like family. We will watch each other's backs like brothers. At some point, everyone here will have to wield a weapon and kill our enemies." Hearing Jason's words from an outsider's perspective, it was clear what he meant. This was all about surviving in a new world and adapting to the changes. Everyone understood that walkers would not be their only enemies trying to kill them. Some people were frightened by these possibilities, others refused to accept them as reality, and many remained silent, showing no emotion. But Jason knew very well that, whether in the past or the future, trusting people outside their comfort zone would be a grave mistake, and soon, everyone would realize what humans were capable of. But you don't have to be afraid. As long as we work together and train, we will become so strong that no one will be able to disturb our peace. No one will even think of harming us. I need you all. I need you to master the skills to protect yourselves and this place. I don't care if you're children, women, or elderly men, the world has changed. It no longer matters who you were in the past. Your top priority now is to protect your family and loved ones. From now on, groups will be formed with experienced men to begin expanding our territory and bringing resources to the refuge. Upon hearing that even women and children needed training, Laurie couldn't help but look at her husband. Rick felt Laurie's gaze and turned his head to meet his wife's slightly dissatisfied expression. Although he understood Laurie's concern, deep down, he still agreed with Jason's proposal, which ensured peace for everyone. After a brief silence, Jason looked at everyone and announced, "I'd like to give you a piece of advice. Don't expect the world to go back to how it was before or even to become better." Jason looked at Edwin Yonera and his wife. They nodded, and he continued, "There will no longer be a society if a cure is not found, and that's because everyone present, including myself, is infected with the virus." This statement caused murmurs to explode among the crowd. Suddenly, there was a lot of discussion, and even 2 women collapsed to the ground, fainting. Several people standing next to Jason also looked at him in shock. "Jason, is what you said true? Then why haven't we turned into those infected?" Dale couldn't help but be the first to ask. Everyone fell silent, looking at Jason, expecting answers about what he had just said. Jason had anticipated this reaction from the people. He hadn't planned to reveal this secret, but he finally did after hearing Edwin's words. After all, there was no benefit in hiding this information. I believe those answers will be provided by the lead researcher of this center, Candice Yonera. After Jason pointed to Candice, she nodded and stepped forward. Indeed, it wasn't important to mention this before because there weren't many people in this place. But now, everyone needs to be aware of the truth. The answer is yes, we all carry the virus in our bodies. The reason we don't immediately turn into infected subjects is that our immune system manages to contain it to some extent. But once the body stops functioning, whether or not you were bitten, as long as the brain remains intact, we all eventually turn into the infected known as walkers. Candice paused and continued, because of this, until we find a cure, it doesn't matter who you are with, if someone dies of natural causes, remember to be compassionate and damage the brain as needed to prevent those around us from turning into walkers. After she said that, the crowd erupted in shouts one after another, and it was difficult for people to accept it. Although reality was cruel, Jason also believed that telling the truth was better. Over time, people would get used to it. With this in mind, it was best for everyone to be aware that people who die of natural causes can also turn into walkers. For the elderly who are bedridden, certain precautions must be taken, and for safety reasons, protocols must be in place. At first, Jason didn't agree with Rick's decision. He had kept such important news to himself and insisted on waiting for casualties before revealing this information. But Jason couldn't take those risks. He needed to ensure that this shelter was sustainable and that the CDC would be the main base for his SCT community and the foundation of a new world. Looking at the people discussing in front of him, Jason had no intention of stopping, so he pointed out, "You should all understand why I am sharing such important information with you. But for those who still don't understand, there are two key reasons. The first is that you must all be aware that even if we eliminate all the walkers in the world, even if many of us die to achieve that, there will still be walkers everywhere. And that is why we must keep the CDC safe. I am pleased to inform you that the scientific research project led by Mrs. Yonera is about to make significant progress, though nothing is certain yet." After saying this, Jason paused and added, "But things aren't all bad. Recent research has solved the initial problems of the undead virus, and soon, we may assume that even smaller issues can be addressed." Jason turned his head to look at Candice beside him. The two exchanged places, and Candice's slightly haggard face showed some excitement. "Hello, everyone. As Jason just mentioned, our team has been conducting experiments day and night in the laboratory long before the virus was officially announced. Thanks to the continuous efforts of many members of my team, we have recently discovered a small substance that can eliminate certain amounts of the virus. We are also improving the component as quickly as possible, and I believe that in a short time, we may be able to develop a vaccine that will prevent death from a walker bite if it is administered immediately after infection." Immediately, the crowd began asking questions. "What do you mean bioimmunity with impossibilities?" Edwin explained, "Literally, it means that we cannot be completely immune to infection from scratches and bites from the infected. However, there is a possibility that with a vaccine, we can prevent people from turning into walkers. In other words, if someone is bitten, there is a chance they might not die from the virus infection." Candice nodded and continued, "That's right. This reagent is still in the experimental stage, but we will take advantage of this time to refine it and produce a finished product as soon as possible." "Incredible! Great job! Ha ha ha!" Jason raised his hand to signal everyone to be quiet and took this opportunity to interrupt and explain everything clearly. "Let's stop here regarding the vaccine. The two doctors need to return to the lab to continue their work. Next, I will mention two more things. The first is that I will conduct research in the area surrounding Atlanta during everyone's training period. I will try to find a new location that will allow us to have a second shelter and the possibility of moving if this place becomes unsustainable. I will try to locate our next refuge. The The second point is that next week, Sam, Shane, and Rick will be in charge of training in shooting and combat skills, and then we will begin exploring and gathering resources. Merle and his younger brother, Daryl, will always be providing survival training. Is there anything you want to add? Merle's rough voice sounded, "No, no problem." Daryl didn't speak, he just nodded at Jason. "All right, I've finished discussing today's matters. Everyone, listen to the arrangements. Rick, Shane, and Sam will begin today's training plan immediately. All right, the meeting is over."
And that concludes this episode. If you enjoyed it, I'd seriously love it if you guys could leave a like on the video, as it genuinely helps out so much, and it keeps me going, plus it takes only 1 second. That said, have a wonderful day. See you in the next one.